Imagine lying in bed at the end of a long day, your thoughts racing, your chest a little tight, and your mind wandering through everything you didn't get done, everything that went wrong, or everything you're still waiting for. You stare at the ceiling, hoping for sleep, but instead you're stuck in your head, replaying worries that feel like they'll never end. But let me ask you this: what if tonight could be different? What if instead of clinging to stress, you could let it all go? What if you could close your eyes with peace, knowing deep in your bones that everything is temporary? The truth is, life is always changing. The hard moments pass. The heavy feelings lift. Even the thoughts that feel so loud right now will fade like echoes by morning. But we forget that, don't we? We believe the moment we're in will last forever, especially the painful ones, and that's exactly why you're here. Tonight, you're going to hear the most calming, powerful reminders about why nothing lasts forever. And that's not something to fear, it's something that can set you free. So before we begin, I want you to say something to yourself, not out loud, just quietly, in your heart. I am safe. I am letting go. This moment will pass. You're not just saying a phrase. You're giving your nervous system permission to relax. You're teaching your mind that it's okay to stop holding on. Now take a slow breath in, let it out, and let's begin. There's something oddly beautiful about things that fall apart. A dried leaf curling inward on itself. An old house with flaking paint and creaking stairs. The way an apple browns once it's been sliced open. These aren't just signs of ruin, they're signs of life doing what it always does. Changing, shifting, moving forward even as it breaks down. There's a calm that comes when we stop resisting this. A quiet peace when we stop trying to hold on so tightly and just let things be. Decay is not a flaw in the system. It is the system. And when you start to really see that, not just understand it in theory, but feel it in your body, something softens inside you. You stop needing everything to be perfect. You stop clenching. You stop living like you're in a race to preserve everything exactly as it is, and you start breathing easier. All around you, every day, you're surrounded by gentle reminders that nothing lasts forever. But the truth is, we rarely look closely enough to learn from them. We walk past rusted fences, fallen petals, and worn-out shoes, and we think, old, broken, useless. But what if we saw wisdom there instead? What if each crack, each fade, each crumble was a teacher? Start with something simple, a leaf in late autumn. Not the bright, fiery ones that grab everyone's attention, but the ones that have already started to dry out and sink into the dirt. Their color has dulled. Their edges have curled. They're quiet now, not trying to be anything, not competing, just being what they are in this moment, no more, no less. When you sit with that, without judgment, you begin to understand something deep. Everything is temporary, and that's okay. Nature doesn't resist this truth. It doesn't panic when the tree goes bare or when the fruit ripens and rots. It allows it. It accepts decay as a stage in a cycle. But as humans, we tend to fight this reality. We want things to last. We want our relationships to stay perfect, our youth to stay visible, our success to stay constant. We want control, and when we don't have it, we suffer. But what happens when you start to see decay not as the end of something, but as a transition? A passing phase, just like the blooming before it. Suddenly, rust on a metal gate doesn't look like failure. It looks like time. doing its gentle work. The paint peeling from an old wall tells a story of weather, of years, of life. That story, even though it's full of loss, can be deeply beautiful when you stop needing it to be tidy. Decay shows you what matters. It strips away what's unnecessary and leaves only what's essential. That's why people who've lost something often speak with such clarity. They know what can't be taken. They've seen what remains when everything else has faded. And that knowing, painful though it may be, can be profoundly grounding. Watch how a fallen tree becomes home to insects, how it feeds the soil, how it breaks down slowly, without protest. There's no rush, no complaint, just a quiet transformation. And in that silence is a kind of healing, a reminder that letting go doesn't mean losing. Sometimes it means returning to the earth, returning to truth, returning to peace. Decay can teach you patience. Nothing happens overnight. Mold doesn't appear the second fruit is left out. It starts slowly, invisibly. The changes are tiny at first, just a spot, just a softness. And yet, over time, everything transforms. In a world where we want quick answers and instant fixes, decay teaches the long rhythm, the rhythm of seasons, of years, of lifetimes. And here's something even more powerful. Decay teaches humility. It reminds you that you're not separate from the natural world. You too are changing. You too are softening, fading, becoming. No matter how strong you are today, your body will slow, your hair will gray, your voice will quiet. And that's not a tragedy. That's life honoring its promise to keep flowing. There's a reason why old objects often feel sacred. A grandmother's worn book, a faded photograph, a cracked teacup. It's not because they're valuable in a material sense. It's because they carry the texture of time. You touch them and you feel presence. You feel all the hands that held them before, all the stories that soaked into their edges. There's reverence in that. Not because they're perfect, but because they lasted long enough to fall apart. If you're always trying to preserve, to keep things untouched, to stop them from changing, you will suffer. Because that fight is never won. The flowers will wilt, the roof will leak, the skin will wrinkle. And still, life will go on. Still, beauty will remain. Just a different kind of beauty. A softer one. A quieter one. Look again at rust. It's not just a breakdown of metal. It's what happens when air and water meet steel and stay a while. It's not destruction, it's transformation. And maybe that's what most decay is. A slow, honest transformation. The kind you can't fake. The kind that doesn't need to impress anyone. When you learn to sit with this process, something in you will shift. You'll stop needing everything to be new, untouched, flawless. You'll begin to see value in wear and tear, in things that have been used, loved, weathered. Because those things tell the truth. They don't pretend to be anything they're not. They just are. Watching decay can even help you heal from grief. Not by taking the pain away, but by helping you understand that endings are not wrong. They're natural. That ache you feel when something ends is not a punishment. It's proof that it mattered. And once you see that, you can begin to let go, not with bitterness, but with grace. There's something deeply human about loving something that's falling apart. A chipped mug you refuse to throw out. An old sweater with holes you still wear. a face lined with age that feels more alive than any smooth surface ever could. This is where the heart speaks, not in perfection, but in memory, in presence, in tenderness. This practice of watching decay isn't about becoming cold or detached. It's the opposite. It's about softening your grip so you can hold the moment more gently. When you know it won't last, you start to pay attention. You stop taking things for granted. You savor. And in that savoring, life becomes deeper, fuller, realer. Control is often just fear in disguise. Fear that if you don't hold tight, everything will slip away. But watching decay shows you that things will slip away no matter what. That's not a failure, it's a mercy. Because when things fall apart, space is made. New growth becomes possible. Even the forest floor, covered in dead leaves and fallen branches, becomes rich soil for something new. You don't have to love the process of losing, but you can respect it. You can walk through it with open eyes, knowing that you are not being punished. You are being returned to truth, to stillness, to what's real beneath all the noise. That's the gift of decay. It humbles, it heals, it simplifies. And here's the quiet miracle. When you really take this in, not just once, but over time, you begin to suffer less. You begin to breathe through change instead of fight it. You begin to let go before life forces your hand. And that gentle surrender, that's peace. Let yourself notice the little things, the banana browning in the fruit bowl, the petals gathering on the windowsill, the smell of wood that's been rained on. These things are speaking to you, if you let them, not with words, but with presence, with truth. And when you go to sleep tonight, carry this with you, not as something to figure out or control, but as something to rest inside. Let the day decay. Let your thoughts fade. Let it all soften, gently, like the leaf becoming part of the soil again. Not gone, just changed, just released, just returned. And so the day ends. The sun lowers its gaze, and what's left behind isn't just silence or rest, but an invitation to turn inward, not to escape, but to notice. The outside world slows down, but inside, something continues to move. Thoughts linger, feelings rise like steam, and yet most of them pass without a name, without a voice, without a chance to be seen. What if the tension in your chest wasn't just stress? What if the heavy eyes, the tight jaw, or the sudden tiredness had a story your mind hasn't told yet? Beneath the surface of your awareness, emotions are always flowing, not loud, not obvious, but constant. They come in quiet waves. Sometimes they leave residue, other times they vanish before you even notice them. This is the space where most of our suffering begins, not from what we feel, but from what we never pause to feel fully. And yet, it's also where our healing can start. So much of our inner world moves in invisible time. These aren't the emotions you talk about easily, not the ones you label or share. These are the brief shadows that pass through a room, the flickers behind a sigh, the momentary unease that makes you snap at someone you love, or pull away without knowing why. They arrive as signals. But when left unnamed, they grow roots in silence. They show up as habits you don't understand, decisions you later question, or exhaustion that doesn't match your day. That is the cost of ignoring these unnamed visitors. They stay longer when you don't greet them. Most people walk through life responding to what's happening outside, unaware that their reactions are being shaped by what's happening inside. often without language. That's what makes these emotions powerful. You're not avoiding them out of weakness, you simply don't realize they're there. They move too quietly, slipping beneath your awareness like wind under a door. But here's something remarkable. Just bringing attention to this hidden current begins to change how it moves. You don't need to dissect every feeling or turn your heart into a puzzle. You just need to notice. To pause for a breath and wonder, what am I feeling beneath this moment? Not what you're thinking. What you're feeling, even if you can't name it right away. The body is often the first to know. A lump in the throat, a twist in the stomach, a strange urge to clean something or leave a room. Before the mind has a chance to translate, the body speaks, and its language is subtle. It speaks in weight, in warmth, in chill, in tightness. If you start to pay attention to these signals without needing to explain them, you begin to build a bridge between the visible and the invisible, between what you know and what you sense. This is not about fixing emotions, it's about letting them pass. Like clouds through an open sky. You don't hold on to them, you don't push them away, you let them come and you let them go. That's how they stay small. When you cling to an unnamed feeling, it stretches into something else, something louder. It becomes irritation or sadness or guilt. But at its start, it was only a brief flicker. Something light enough to float away if you had only noticed it. Many emotions arise not from the present moment, but from the leftovers of previous ones. That awkward encounter 5 days ago, the quiet resentment you didn't voice, the fear you carried all week but kept covering up with distractions. They don't disappear just because you didn't talk about them. They change shape, they find new exits. And without your awareness, they begin to steer the wheel. When you start naming what you feel, even with just a whisper of attention, you interrupt that pattern. The emotion becomes a visitor, not a driver. It doesn't need to take over. It simply needs to be felt and allowed to leave. Some of the most powerful emotional shifts happen when you begin to notice the gap between feeling and reaction. That space, no matter how small, is where freedom lives. Most people miss it. They feel something and immediately respond. Defensiveness, anger, withdrawal, avoidance. But when you begin to recognize the feeling before the reaction, you create space, a breath, a choice. And that's when real peace begins, not when you stop feeling, but when you stop reacting without knowing why. Even joy has unnamed layers. That burst of energy from music, that sudden lightness in your step when you see someone you care about. Sometimes you don't notice these moments either. Not because they're painful, but because they're brief, subtle. You miss them while chasing bigger feelings. But if you learn to stop and feel them fully, you'll see that joy, like grief, often visits in quiet, short waves. We tend to think emotions need words, but many of them don't. They only need space. They need breath. They need you to pause without judgment. Naming can help, yes, but presence is what really allows them to pass. Being with them, not analyzing them. It's helpful to think of your inner world like a river. Some parts of it are loud and crashing, big feelings like heartbreak, rage, excitement. But underneath, there's always a deeper, slower current. This is where the subtle emotions live. The ones you've carried for years without knowing. The ones that speak not in words, but in patterns, in how you sleep, how you speak, how you hold yourself when no one's watching. And the most beautiful thing is that this current can change, not by force, but by gentle awareness. Each time you sit quietly with yourself and ask, "What's here right now?" You're clearing the water. You're letting what's stuck begin to move again. You're creating a life where you don't just function, you feel, and you understand what you feel. There is no need to become an expert in your own pain. You're not trying to build a perfect emotional vocabulary. You're trying to soften, to notice, to make space inside your life for the feelings that have been hiding behind productivity, perfectionism, and pressure. Sometimes, all it takes is one breath. One question asked gently, "Is this mine? Or is this something I picked up along the way?" You'll be surprised how often the answer is, it was never yours to hold in the first place. Maybe it came from your past, from your family, from something you were never allowed to express. But when you name it, when you feel it, it loses its grip. There's freedom in admitting you don't know exactly what you're feeling, because in that honesty, you open a door. You say to yourself, "Whatever this is, I'm willing to feel it." And that's when things start to move, not through force, through permission. The goal is not to avoid these invisible feelings. The goal is to feel them early, gently, before they turn into something heavier, like noticing a breeze before it becomes a storm. It's easier to open a window than to repair a shattered wall, and that's what this practice offers you: early awareness, gentle intervention. Over time, you'll notice that even old emotions start to rise to the surface. Grief you thought you buried, fear you forgot about, tenderness you didn't know you still had. And you'll learn to hold them without needing to explain them away. You'll learn to trust that whatever comes up will also pass, because that's what emotions do when you stop trapping them in silence. Even when you wake up in a bad mood and don't know why, this awareness can help. You pause, you breathe, you remind yourself, something is moving through me. And instead of fighting it, you watch. You stay curious. You trust that you are not broken. You are simply feeling. This level of emotional presence doesn't make life easier, it makes it truer. You'll still feel anger, sadness, shame, but they won't own you, they won't define your day. They'll visit and they'll leave, because you let them. At night, when everything slows down, this practice becomes even more important. That's when unspoken emotions tend to rise. The day is over, but your body still holds what the mind skipped past. And if you don't listen, those feelings turn into restlessness, into tension, into the kind of sleep that doesn't feel restful. But if you pause and ask, "What is still living in me from today?" you begin to let it go before the night carries it deeper. The more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. You'll start noticing invisible feelings during the day, a small pang of envy, a flash of disappointment, a tiny hurt that used to hide. And instead of brushing them off, you'll breathe through them. You'll say, "I see you," and they'll pass faster than they ever did before. You don't need to chase healing. It's already happening every time you become more aware. You're building emotional honesty in quiet moments. You're learning the rhythm of your inner world. And in that rhythm, there's a calm you've been missing. When you live like this, you begin to suffer less, not because you feel less, but because you stop being afraid of your own feelings. You trust that they're not here to hurt you. They're here to move through you and to leave something lighter behind. And that's what invisible time teaches you, that your emotions are not permanent, even if they feel intense. That you are not what you feel. You are the space those feelings move through. You are the witness, the sky, not the weather. So tonight, as you close your eyes, don't try to solve everything. Just check in. What are you holding? What are you ready to let pass? You don't need to fix. You just need to feel and then release. Let the feelings fade like colors at sunset. Let the thoughts soften like footprints in wind. Let invisible time carry you gently to sleep. It's in the softest moments that the deepest truths arrive. After the noise fades, after the weight of the day begins to slip off your shoulders, something quieter emerges. A kind of stillness, not because everything is resolved, but because you are no longer chasing resolution. You've begun to see that you don't have to hold on to every feeling. You can let them pass, just like breath, just like wind, just like time. Now, your awareness can open even more. This time, not just to what's happening inside you, but to what's always been around you. The world's quiet way of showing you how to let go without fear. There is a form of peace that doesn't come from fixing anything, but from watching life move and shift again and again without ever staying the same. It starts with light, shimmering briefly on water, then disappearing. There's no grasping, no permanence, just a flicker. And yet, that flicker can show you everything. Reflections on water are delicate. They appear for a second, then break. A wave passes. The wind shifts. The light moves. What you see is never solid. It's always changing. But that doesn't make it less beautiful. In fact, that's what makes it beautiful. You're watching something that isn't trying to stay. It's only here for a moment. And that moment, because it's fleeting, holds all its magic. That's the kind of peace we're often missing. Not the kind you get from certainty, but the kind that comes from accepting the lack of it. Watching water teaches you how to stop holding on. When you watch the surface of a lake shift with the breeze, when you see the sun glint for just a heartbeat and then vanish, you're seeing something sacred. Not because it stays, but because it doesn't. This teaches you not just how to observe, but how to be. When you stop needing to hold the moment in place, you become part of its rhythm. You soften, you breathe with it, not against it. You're no longer struggling to control your experience. You're witnessing it unfold. Clouds do the same. They drift, constantly changing shape. They don't announce when they'll arrive or how long they'll stay. They don't apologize for blocking the sun or for turning gray. And then, just like that, they're gone. You can stare at the same patch of sky for 5 minutes and see an entirely different world. This gentle shift reminds you that everything you experience, every thought, every emotion, every worry, will move too if you let it. Even the tide doesn't resist change. It comes in, it goes out. It never tries to stay high or avoid going low. It surrenders to the pull over and over again. In that rhythm, there's wisdom. There's no rush, no urgency, no need to be more or less, just a natural ebb and flow that always knows what to do next. When you begin to watch nature not as scenery, but as teacher, your relationship to life changes. You start to notice how peace doesn't come from silence alone. It comes from presence, from being fully with what is, without needing it to last or look different. The sunlight on a pond, the way it dances in patterns you couldn't plan, shows you that even brief beauty can be enough. You don't need to own the moment to feel it. You just need to be there for it. This changes how you carry your past too. You begin to see memories like reflections, real in their time, but no longer something to chase. You don't have to recreate them. You don't have to grieve their passing forever. like the way a cloud once looked like a ship or a bird before shifting into something else. Your memories shaped you, but they don't have to define you. They can live in your heart, like sunlight lives on water, just passing, just visiting. Nature teaches you the truth of impermanence without saying a word. When you watch shadows move across the ground, when you follow the way light filters through trees, you learn to hold space for things that are always changing. You stop asking the world to freeze for you. You stop wishing for time to slow down. Instead, you start to walk with time, gently, like a friend. There's peace in knowing you don't need to understand everything. You don't need to catch every wave or name every cloud. You just need to stay open to what arrives. That openness allows life to surprise you, to soften you, to free you. You're not here to capture every moment. You're here to live through them, letting each one show you something you couldn't have found any other way. This isn't about detachment or indifference. It's about connection without clinging, loving fully without needing permanence. When you stop holding things too tightly, you actually feel them more, because your fear of losing them no longer stands in the way. Watching moving water shows you what gentle acceptance looks like. It flows around rocks, over roots, around debris. It doesn't get stuck. It adapts, and somehow, in that movement, it finds its way forward. Always. Let that teach you something about your own life, about how you respond when things don't go as planned, about how you deal with loss, with change, with endings. When you realize that even the most beautiful reflections fade, and that's not a tragedy, it's just what they're meant to do, you stop resisting what comes next. You begin to feel peace in moments you would have overlooked before. The way morning light hits your wall, the shadow of leaves swaying in the breeze, the way your breath moves softly through your body when you pause. None of these moments last, but they don't need to. Their value isn't in how long they stay. It's in how fully you notice them while they're here. This is what anchors you, not certainty, not control, but presence. The decision to meet each moment as it is, and then let it go. When you live this way, you begin to trust that something new is always arriving, that no experience is wasted, that no feeling needs to be permanent to be meaningful. The world is full of reminders, the sparkle of dew, the hush of wind through grass, the dance of rain on windows. Each one shows you how to be alive without needing to hold the moment forever. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. And it makes your relationships deeper too. When you stop trying to make people or moments last forever, you appreciate them more. You speak more gently, you listen more fully. You realize that presence is the most generous gift you can give, because it means you're not somewhere else in your mind. You're right here, with them, now. Nature doesn't worry about what's next. It doesn't ask, was this enough? It just continues with grace. It gives you permission to stop performing, to stop rushing, to stop needing everything to add up to something. Sometimes the moment is enough, even if it's brief. Sometimes the sunlight only hits the water once. Sometimes the wind shifts and the reflection disappears. And that's okay. That's what makes peace possible, not avoiding change, but embracing it. Seeing it not as loss, but as life moving in its natural way. You don't have to fight it. You don't have to explain it. You just have to let it in. And in letting it in, you'll begin to notice something else too. You don't need as much as you thought. You don't need constant progress or answers or clarity. Sometimes all you need is stillness, a breath, a window, a moment of sunlight. And that moment, though it passes, leaves something behind. A quiet imprint, a small shift. A memory not of what you held, but of what you let go. So when you wake tomorrow, or when you find yourself anxious in the middle of the day, remember the water, the light, the sky, not because they last, but because they don't. Not because they offer solutions, but because they show you how to stay soft in a world that's always changing. And as you fall asleep tonight, know this: the peace you're looking for isn't somewhere far away. It's already here, in the quiet, in the dark, in the way your breath moves in and out. Just like the tide, just like the clouds, just like the sunlight that flickered and left a little warmth behind. The day's light faded, the reflections dimmed, and with them went every small shimmer that came and went without asking for your attention. They never stayed long. They never needed to. That was their gift, passing beauty that didn't require permission to leave. What remains is the quiet knowing that nothing stands still, and in that knowing, something shifts inside you. The need to hold loosens. The need to rush quiets. But there's still something else, something even more delicate. The things so small, so subtle, they go unnoticed, even in our calmest moments. These are the micro moments, and they are the ones that change everything. There are pauses in your life that vanish the second they arrive. A breeze that crosses your skin with just the right temperature. The way someone says your name without thinking about it. A child's glance that holds a question you don't answer in time. These moments don't leave behind stories. They leave behind traces, barely felt, quickly forgotten, but deeply real. They're not loud. They don't demand reflection, but they are where presence lives in its purest form. Every day, these micro moments pass through your life like sparks. Most vanish unnoticed, not because they weren't meaningful, but because they weren't dramatic. In a world obsessed with milestones, we forget how much life happens between them. But these in-between moments are often where connection, clarity, and joy first appear. A sip of tea while the steam rises. The 2 seconds of eye contact with someone before a smile. The sound of your own laugh surprising you. None of it repeats in exactly the same way. Even if you try to recreate it, you'll find it changed. The temperature, the angle, the rhythm, different. That's what makes it precious. And once you see this clearly, it's impossible to unsee. We're taught to aim for the big things, the celebrations, the achievements, the bold changes. But the fabric of a good life isn't stitched from grand events. It's woven from the ordinary things we overlook. The way your hands feel while folding laundry. The faint scent of something sweet in the hallway. The sensation of laying your head on your pillow at just the right angle. You may never notice them again, but you were there. They happened. They mattered. This awareness doesn't just sharpen your attention, it softens your heart. You begin to notice beauty in places you used to rush past. A door slightly open, letting in just enough light. The feeling of quiet in a room where no one speaks. The first second after you wake up, before thoughts begin. These are moments that hold no story, but they offer a depth that words can't hold. The practice of noticing micro moments is not about chasing mindfulness. It's not a task. It's an openness, a kind of listening that happens without effort. You don't need to do anything extra. You just need to stop skipping ahead. Stay in the part of life that's happening now, even if it feels like nothing is happening at all. This shift in awareness changes how you relate to time. Life starts to feel longer, not because more happens, but because you're finally present for what is happening. When you're aware of these tiny instances, you stretch time in a way that creates more depth without needing more hours. You'll also find that appreciation begins to grow naturally. Gratitude becomes less of a list and more of a presence. You stop needing reasons to feel thankful. You feel it because you're awake to what you used to sleep through. That moment when your favorite song starts to play. The brief stillness before rain. A stranger holding the door just long enough. It's all alive. Even difficult days begin to offer something. Not because they're pleasant, but because they, too, contain flashes of tenderness. A shared glance with someone else in pain. A deep breath that steadies your heart. The warmth of a shower after a hard moment. These tiny gifts don't remove the weight, but they add small points of light that guide you through it. Micro moments can also help heal disconnection. So many conflicts, regrets, and emotional distances are rooted in the habit of absence. We don't hear what people meant. We miss what they tried to offer. We overlook their small attempts at closeness. But when you start seeing the small moments, you start seeing people again. You recognize the hand placed lightly on your back, the extra time someone waited, the quiet patience in someone's voice. These are the love languages no one talks about. And it works both ways. Your own gestures, when offered with full attention, become part of someone else's micro moments. A pause before you respond, a note left where it will be found, a soft good night, spoken just right. You don't need to perform to be present, you just need to mean it. This way of living also frees you from perfectionism, because micro moments are not curated, they're not filtered, they're raw, imperfect, fleeting, but they're honest. You don't need to be at your best to offer something real. Even your tired sigh can carry connection, if it's shared in presence. You'll also start to notice how your surroundings hold micro moments of their own. The sound of a drawer closing, the light flickering through leaves, the way a candle flickers before going out. These aren't backdrops. They are part of your experience. And when you stop treating them as noise, they start to feel like messages, reminders, gentle nudges towards stillness. This kind of awareness does not slow you down in the way you might expect. It doesn't make you unproductive. It simply clears out the mental clutter that steals your energy. Because when you stop ignoring life's smallest moments, you stop needing constant stimulation. You stop chasing intensity. You start receiving what's already here. There's also a sense of relief that comes with this practice. You don't need to wait for the right time to feel whole. You don't need to reach a goal to feel grounded. You can feel it in the now, even in the smallest version of it, even in a passing breeze, even in silence. This allows you to meet your emotions differently too. When you're deeply present, sadness becomes less overwhelming. Joy becomes less elusive. You're no longer chasing or avoiding. You're simply experiencing. You can notice the slight tightening before tears, the bubbling energy before a laugh, the shift in your body when you start to feel peaceful. These are clues, doorways. You don't need to fix anything, just follow the feeling and let it teach you. Over time, this way of seeing the world builds a sense of intimacy with life itself. You stop living from the outside in. You begin to feel at home wherever you are. Because the moment is no longer something to get through, it becomes a space to belong to. Even the way you speak begins to shift. You use fewer words. You say more with tone, with timing, with presence. You realize that what people feel in your company isn't based on how impressive your words are, but how deeply you're there with them. This is how micro-moments deepen relationships, without effort, without scripts. And at night, when your thoughts drift, this awareness stays with you. You notice the way the blanket feels, the way your breath slows, the way the day ends without needing a conclusion. And in those seconds before sleep, you find a kind of trust you didn't have before. Trust that even if nothing big happens tomorrow, your life will still hold value because you will notice the things others miss. That is the quiet reward of this practice. A life that no longer needs to be spectacular to feel full. A presence that doesn't need to be explained. A peace that doesn't depend on perfect conditions. You are not here to capture every moment. You are here to notice the ones that are already slipping by. And in doing so, you don't just extend time, you deepen it. You don't just witness life, you participate in it, fully, softly, one tiny, irreplaceable moment at a time. Even the smallest moments we miss carry weight. The brush of a glance, the breath before a reply, the pause that felt like it meant more. These micro-moments teach us presence. But not every moment leads to understanding. Not every sentence ends with peace. Some stories stop in the middle. Some voices go quiet before you're ready. Some answers never arrive. And yet, life keeps moving. There's a quiet ache that lives inside unfinished conversations. The kind you keep replaying in your head, the ones you wish you'd handled better, the ones that ended too soon or never really ended at all. You carry their weight in subtle ways, through hesitation, through old tension in your body, through words you still practice in silence. It's easy to think that closure is the only way to let them go. But there is another path, a softer, quieter one, the path of allowing. Not every relationship will reach clarity. Not every misunderstanding will be corrected. Not every apology will come. Sometimes people leave, physically or emotionally, without saying goodbye. Sometimes you grow out of each other without realizing it until it's too late. Sometimes the silence stretches so long that picking up where you left off feels impossible. This is part of being human. Not every thread ties neatly. There is peace in no longer chasing the conclusion, because the more you demand resolution, the longer the wound stays open. The more you rehearse what you would have said, the more power that absence holds over you. What if healing wasn't about finishing the story, but about releasing your need to? You are allowed to move on without the last word. You're allowed to carry love or grief or disappointment, even if no one validated it. What you felt was real, even if no one acknowledged it. Your inner experience does not need external confirmation to be legitimate. This kind of release isn't denial, it's maturity. It's the choice to free yourself from waiting. Waiting for someone else's readiness, waiting for circumstances to align, waiting for the right moment to rewrite what's already done. That waiting can keep you trapped for years. It's a kind of emotional paralysis, and it ends the moment you accept that closure might never come from outside you. What if the silence you received was the answer? What if the conversation not had was a boundary in itself? Sometimes people say what they mean through absence, through avoidance, through a choice not to engage. That doesn't make your pain less valid, it just invites a different kind of listening. one that doesn't demand words. Unfinished conversations teach you to listen with your whole life, not just your ears. They teach you to accept that people leave with pieces of you, and that doesn't mean you're broken. It means you opened. It means you shared. And sometimes the sharing wasn't returned. That's hard, but it's also part of loving. You can honor what you didn't say without needing to say it now. Some things are meant to stay unspoken, not because they weren't important, but because they served their purpose just by existing inside you. The unsent letter, the unsaid apology, the thought that still echoes when you pass their name. These are not failures. They are reminders that the heart continues even when the dialogue ends. Grief often hides in these unfinished spaces. Not just grief for people who are gone, but for versions of yourself you never got to explain. The younger you who needed comfort. The angrier you who didn't know how to speak with care. The you who stayed quiet out of fear. It's okay to grieve those selves too. Closure sometimes looks like holding space for who you were without needing to justify it. There's also a quiet dignity in not chasing people who aren't willing to meet you where you are. You don't need to force a return. You don't need to beg for understanding. If someone walked away without giving you peace, you can still choose to create your own. That's not bitterness, it's inner strength. It's choosing to water your own roots rather than waiting for someone else to pour. Some of the most transformative growth happens when you stop rewriting the past and start creating from the present. When you let the unanswered be part of the landscape, not a flaw to fix. This allows you to soften around the pain. It stops being sharp. It becomes part of your story's texture. There's also peace in understanding that people often cannot offer closure because they are struggling too. They may not know how to face what happened. They may not have the emotional tools to speak clearly. They may be trapped in their own regrets or confusion. Accepting this doesn't excuse harm. It simply frees you from expecting someone to give what they never learned to give. You can forgive someone without hearing, "I'm sorry." You can find gratitude in a connection that ended in silence. You can hold compassion for someone who hurt you while still honoring your own boundaries. This balance is what emotional freedom feels like. Not needing revenge, not needing explanation, just breathing fully into your own reality. Letting go of unfinished stories doesn't mean forgetting. It means letting them settle into your memory without dragging them into your future. Some of the most powerful resolutions happen in quiet ways. Through writing, through prayer, through sitting alone with what you feel and saying, "I don't understand this, but I release it anyway." This act of release is not passive, it's active trust. Trust that you don't need to control how everything ends. Trust that even unanswered pain can lead to depth. Trust that you are whole, even with untied threads. Closure is often thought of as a door closing, but sometimes it's simply a breath, a pause, a nod to the fact that life moved differently than you expected. And it's not just about romantic or family relationships. Unfinished conversations happen in friendships, in work relationships, in brief connections that unexpectedly touched something deep. You might not even remember the last thing that was said, only the feeling of distance that followed. That, too, is part of this process. Your nervous system craves resolution because it wants safety, it wants completion. But sometimes the deepest safety comes from teaching yourself that not everything needs to make sense to be okay, that you can still move gently, live fully, even when parts of your past feel incomplete. This is a kind of spiritual maturity, to walk forward without dragging behind every unanswered question, to feel the ache but not let it close your heart, to let silence exist without letting it turn to resentment. That's a strength most people never develop, because it requires a kind of surrender that's not taught in most places. You may never know why someone left, why they didn't respond, why they changed. And yet, you can choose to remain open, not naive, not foolish, but open in the sense that you don't let one ending turn you bitter, that you don't let one silence become your worldview. You are not the words you didn't get to say. You are the presence you bring now, the care you show others, the gentleness you offer yourself when the old memories return. That's where real resolution lives, not in trying to make the past clean, but in bringing clarity to how you carry it forward. And sometimes, the healing comes when you stop asking what it all meant, when you allow yourself to sit with the reality that it happened, that it ended, that it changed you, that you are still here, still soft, still capable of love. This is not about pretending things didn't hurt. It's about honoring what did hurt, while no longer letting it shape what comes next. The story doesn't need a perfect ending. It just needs to be allowed to rest. As you continue, notice how even your breath follows this rhythm. It doesn't need to be explained. It just enters and leaves. It doesn't carry every part of your story. It only carries what's needed now. So let that be enough. Let the unsaid stay unsaid. Let the silence be the answer. Let your peace come not from knowing how everything should have ended, but from choosing to begin again, just as you are, in this moment, with nothing left to fix. The story may be unfinished, but you are free to keep living, fully, quietly, completely. You don't need to finish every story to feel whole. Some things close quietly, others never do. But they stop defining you the moment you stop returning to them for meaning. What matters now is how you show up in your life without needing to be the person you were when that story began. And maybe that's the next truth. You're not who you used to be. And you never really were a single version of yourself at all. The self isn't solid. It shifts. Slowly, subtly, constantly. Sometimes you notice the change in big ways. A job left behind, a relationship dissolved, a decision that rewrote your path. But more often, you don't notice it at all. You're not the same person you were last week, not in thought, not in energy, not even in the small way you carry yourself through a room. Yet most of us hold tightly to a fixed idea of who I am. It feels safe. It gives us a label, a role, a shape to cling to in a world that's always moving. But that same comfort becomes a trap when we forget that identity is just a layer, a temporary arrangement of traits, beliefs, experiences, and habits that evolve whether you allow them to or not. You may say, I'm the type of person who always, or I've never been someone who could, and then shape your whole life around those sentences. But how many of them are still true? How many were created in reaction to something or someone that no longer exists in your life? How many are just echoes of an earlier version of you that kept repeating until you mistook it for a fact? The self is not a fixed object. It's a pattern of movement. And when you begin to see yourself this way, everything softens. You stop boxing yourself into a role. You stop defending old behaviors out of habit. You stop needing to be consistent with a version of you that doesn't match who you are now. This isn't instability, it's honesty. You are not your past. You are not your worst day. You are not even your best moment. You are whatever is unfolding in this moment, whether that looks familiar or not. Letting go of a fixed identity doesn't mean you lose yourself. It means you start noticing who you are without the pressure to remain the same. And that's where real freedom begins. The discomfort comes when we confuse change with loss. You feel resistance when the old version of you starts to fade because part of you believes you're disappearing too. But you're not. You're expanding. You're growing into new ways of being, new expressions, new truths. The former self dissolves not because you failed it, but because it was never meant to stay. It's tempting to chase definitions, especially when the world demands them. What do you do? What do you believe? Who are you exactly? But these questions often ask you to reduce yourself to what's most visible. Your job, your opinions, your history. Yet the parts of you that matter most are often the ones you can't name so easily. Your curiosity, your capacity to feel, your willingness to change your mind. When you allow your identity to move, you stop fearing change in others too. You give people space to grow. You don't lock them into your expectations. You stop saying, "You've changed," like it's an accusation. Instead, it becomes a shared reality. We all change. We all let go of who we were to make room for who we're becoming. The practice here is not to erase yourself, but to observe how you hold your self-image. When you say, "This is who I am," notice if it feels like a boundary or a doorway. Is it keeping you stuck or giving you space? Are you using identity to protect yourself from uncertainty or to explore it more honestly? Even your preferences shift over time. The music you once loved, the foods you used to crave, the clothes that used to feel like home. These aren't superficial changes. They're reflections of deeper movement. Your nervous system changes, your brain reorganizes, your soul reaches in new directions. To deny that is to fight the very nature of being alive. There is peace in recognizing that you are not obligated to be who you were yesterday. You don't have to carry every version of yourself forward. Some parts were temporary solutions. Some were reactions to pain. Some were created to survive a moment you've already moved past. Let them fall away. You are allowed to begin again as many times as you need. This also helps dissolve shame. When you see the self as fluid, mistakes become part of a timeline, not a permanent stain. You no longer carry guilt as a fixed identity. I am someone who failed, but as a temporary experience, that happened. I learned. I changed. You stop defining yourself by the roles you couldn't fulfill, the relationships you couldn't save, the ideas you couldn't hold on to. All of it becomes part of the transformation, not evidence against you. This shift also affects how you dream. When you let your identity be soft, your future can be softer too. You don't need to know exactly what you'll become. You don't need to map out every version of success. You don't need to lock yourself into a goal that won't fit you in a year. You get to remain curious, flexible, responsive. You'll also feel less need to defend your choices. When someone says, "But I thought you said," you can simply reply, "That was true when I said it." Truth is not always permanent. It is often time-based, context-based, emotion-based. That doesn't make it a lie. It makes it part of an unfolding story. The body reminds you of this too. The way it ages. The way it responds differently to rest, to food, to stress. You are not in control of every change, and that's not a failure. It's a reminder that growth happens in ways you don't plan. The sooner you align with that truth, the less you'll resist your own evolution. This approach to identity also reduces pressure in relationships. When you stop clinging to who you think you should be, you allow more honesty in how you show up. You can say, "This doesn't feel right anymore," without guilt. You can adjust. You can reintroduce yourself. You can make space for silence when no label fits. Language often fails us here. The words we use to describe ourselves become outdated. Sometimes you outgrow a label before you find a new one. That space in between can feel uncertain, but it's also where the most honest living happens. Between definitions, between certainty, between the need to explain. Let the self be a process, not a product. Let it be an unfolding. Let it contradict itself. Let it dissolve and rebuild. Let it pause. Let it rest. Let it not make sense. Because the more you try to hold your identity in place, the more you limit your own becoming. There's nothing unstable about change. What's unstable is the belief that you must stay the same to be loved, to be trusted, to be known. But the people who truly see you will honor your shifts. They'll grow with you. They'll meet you again and again as you meet yourself. In spiritual practice, this is called impermanence, not just the impermanence of objects or relationships, but the impermanence of me, the personality, the voice, the beliefs, even the sense of I that feels so solid right now. It shifts in meditation, it shifts in grief, it shifts in awe, it shifts in sleep. There are moments when the sense of self fades, not in a frightening way, but in a freeing one. You feel something larger than your story, something quieter than your thoughts. And in that space, there is no fixed you to protect, just awareness, just presence, just being. The more you experience this, the less tightly you hold your roles. You may still play them, you may still care deeply, but you know they're temporary. That knowledge doesn't make you careless, it makes you compassionate. You don't need someone to remain the same for you to love them. You don't need to remain the same to be worthy of love. This way of living also helps you recover from judgment. When someone misunderstands you, you don't need to prove the opposite. You can simply recognize that they're responding to a version of you that may no longer exist. And that's okay. You don't have to fight it. You just keep moving, keep becoming. Even memory can soften. When you look back at who you were, you no longer judge as harshly. You see that you were doing your best with the self you had. That version served a purpose. It carried you, and when it was time, you shed it. So tonight, as you rest, notice what version of you is present. Not the one from this morning, not the one from last year, just this one, with this breath, with these thoughts, with this softness, and let that be enough. There's nothing wrong with not knowing exactly who you are. Sometimes the most grounded thing you can say is, "I'm still finding out." That's not a weakness. That's life, unfolding, one breath, one shift, one self at a time. Some changes unfold quietly, without asking for permission. You wake up one day, and the person you've become no longer fits the story you were telling yourself yesterday. You're softer in some ways, stronger in others, less certain, more aware. And even if you can't explain exactly how it happened, you feel the shift. Nothing outside of you needed to move, but inside, everything did. The question is no longer, who am I? But how am I seeing myself now? Because how you see yourself changes everything, especially when you look back. There's a strange power in holding an old photograph. Not for the image itself, but for what it reveals. About time, about memory, about who you once were, and how you've carried that version of yourself to now. At first, you may focus on the surface, the clothes, the hair, the smile. But if you stay with it a little longer, something deeper unfolds. Not just what happened, but what was felt, what was hidden, what was misunderstood, what's been forgiven. A photo never changes, but you do. And so, every time you look at it again, you bring new eyes. You notice things you missed. The expression that was tight with worry, even though you thought you were fine. The closeness in someone's body that you didn't appreciate at the time. The distance that started before you could name it. These little details carry weight. They hold meaning, not because the photo captures the whole truth, but because it invites you to meet the past without needing to relive it. Memory is not a fixed archive. It's fluid, shaped by your current awareness. When you revisit the past, you're not just recalling, it's a form of re-seeing. You reinterpret what mattered, what hurt, what helped. And often, this reshaping brings a kind of healing. You forgive more easily. You soften toward the version of yourself that didn't know better. You stop demanding that your past be something it couldn't be. There's wisdom in realizing that what once felt permanent now feels distant. The heartbreak that once consumed you now feels like a chapter closed. The dream that didn't work out no longer stings the same way. It's not because the past lost its importance, but because your relationship to it changed. This shift is quiet but powerful. It's how you know you've grown. Photos become mirrors for this change. You see a moment frozen in time, and what it reflects is not just who you were, but how far you've come. That smile may have been real, but you now see the pain behind it. That moment may have been hard, but now you can hold it with less resistance. The lens of now brings clarity, and with clarity comes acceptance. You also begin to understand how much was left out of the frame. A photo is a slice, a curated second. It can't tell the full story, and realizing this is freeing, because it reminds you that what you thought was the whole truth often wasn't. There were feelings unspoken, context you didn't yet understand, lives you didn't fully see, and that humility opens the heart. It makes room for forgiveness, not just of others, but of yourself. Sometimes, the photos that once brought joy now bring sadness, not because the moment was bad, but because it's gone. That's the grief of impermanence, the reminder that nothing stays. But even in that grief, there is tenderness. That moment mattered. You lived it fully, even if you didn't know it at the time. And now, in remembering, you honor it again, not to cling to it, but to recognize its place in your story. This is how you make peace with time, not by trying to hold on, but by letting memory breathe, by giving space for your past to evolve, not in fact, but in meaning. Every time you look again, you're creating a new relationship to that moment, and that's a kind of transformation too. There's also a hidden lesson in the background of every photo. Change is always happening, even when you don't see it. The trees behind you grew, then shed their leaves. The street changed. The house in the background may no longer stand, and so, too, your inner landscape changed. What felt solid then is fluid now. What was urgent then may be irrelevant today. But none of it was wasted. Every version of you was a step toward this one. You don't need to revisit the past to stay stuck in it. You can revisit it to understand, to integrate, to appreciate. Sometimes, looking back is the most honest way to move forward, because when you do it with awareness, you stop fearing the passage of time, you stop grieving change as loss, and start seeing it as evidence of life. This perspective also helps you loosen your grip on the future. When you see how much you've changed, how what mattered 5 years ago no longer defines you, it becomes easier to trust that what feels uncertain now will one day find its place. You don't need to figure it all out. You just need to keep growing into it, one day at a time. Revisiting old photographs also softens your view of others. The people you once blamed now appear more human. You see the tired eyes you missed, the love that was present even in the mess, the care that wasn't always expressed clearly, but was there. You stop needing to rewrite the past. You start seeing it with compassion. Some photos carry weight because of who is missing, faces that are no longer here, places you can't return to. You may never stop missing them, but even that ache transforms. It becomes a thread, not a chain, a memory that lives gently, not as a wound, but as part of your inner landscape. There's also the photo you didn't take, the one you missed, the moment you lived so fully you forgot to document it. And that's its own kind of treasure. Not everything needs to be saved to be real. Not every joy needs a frame. Some moments belong only to the heart, and you carry them not in your phone, but in the subtle ways they changed you. Looking back with new eyes also helps you reclaim the parts of yourself you abandoned, the creativity you let go of, the softness you had before the world hardened you, the wonder you forgot you once held. These pieces are not lost forever. They're waiting to be remembered, to be invited back, not to become who you were, but to carry forward what still matters. This practice is not about nostalgia. It's not about pretending the past was better. It's about honesty, wholeness, seeing all of it, the joy, the confusion, the beauty, the loss, with equal care. Letting it sit beside you like an old friend, not pulling you back, but reminding you of what shaped you. Time is not an enemy, it's a mirror. It reflects your becoming, and when you meet it with openness, you realize you don't need to go back. You just need to go deeper, into the present, into what's real now, into the awareness that everything passes, and that's what gives it value. Tonight, if you hold a photo in your hand, notice what stirs inside you. Let it rise, let it soften, let it teach you something you missed the first time. And then, gently set it down, not because it doesn't matter, but because you don't need to carry it into tomorrow. You are allowed to change how you see your past. You are allowed to hold it with new tenderness. You are allowed to outgrow what once defined you. And in that allowance, you make space, not just for who you were, but for who you're still becoming. Looking back with new eyes allows you to see that even your past wasn't really yours to keep. It was something you passed through, something that passed through you. The moments, the faces, the feelings, they visited, they shaped, they left. You held them for a while, but they never stayed. And the more deeply you feel this, the more gently you begin to live. Everything you've ever experienced has been borrowed. The people you've loved, the time you've been given, the thoughts that cross your mind like clouds. None of it is yours in the way you think. Not permanently, not fully. You don't own the sunlight that warms your skin, the breeze that moves your hair, or even the next breath you take. They arrive without warning, and they leave without explanation. And that truth, rather than taking something away from you, gives everything more meaning. When something is borrowed, you treat it differently. You become careful, not in fear, but in reverence. You stop assuming it will be there tomorrow. You show up with more presence, more respect, more attention. Life begins to feel like a gift, not a possession. This shift can change everything, not by removing your joys, but by deepening your gratitude for them. Even the people in your life are not yours to hold. They come into your story, stay for a while, and then go where they need to go. Sometimes they return, sometimes they don't. But none of them are yours. Not your partner, not your children, not your oldest friend. You share time. You share space. You share moments that shape you both. But nothing is guaranteed. And knowing this doesn't have to bring sadness. It can awaken care. When you stop clinging, you begin to love with more freedom. You give people permission to be who they are, not who you want them to stay. You understand that their path, like yours, is moving. You stop demanding permanence from something that was only meant to be experienced, not owned. Even the version of yourself you wake up with each morning is borrowed. You are not the same from day to day. Your mood shifts, your thoughts come and go, your beliefs evolve. And if you hold them too tightly, you'll feel confused when they no longer fit. But when you see them as temporary visitors, parts of your inner weather, you stop needing to control every internal shift. This recognition brings a kind of inner quiet. The storm doesn't feel so personal. The joy doesn't need to last forever. You start to welcome both, knowing neither was meant to stay, and that allows you to feel more fully, not less. Because you know each sensation is fleeting, each emotion is passing, each thought is simply moving through you, not defining you. Even your experiences are not entirely yours. They are shaped by forces beyond your control, timing, circumstance, other people's choices. You participate in them, yes, but you don't create them from nothing. They are co-authored by the world around you, and that humbles you. You realize how interconnected everything is, how little of your life has been under your control, and how much of it has been shaped by mystery, by accident, by grace. This doesn't mean you're powerless. It means you're part of something larger. You are not the owner of your story. You are the vessel through which it flows. And when you live with that awareness, you begin to release the grip of entitlement. You stop expecting life to deliver exactly what you asked for. Instead, you start learning how to receive what arrives. And this changes how you respond to loss. You no longer see it as life stealing something from you, but as life taking back what was always on loan. A person leaves, a season ends, a dream dissolves. It hurts. But underneath that pain, a deeper truth remains. You had it for a while. You were blessed to know it. And now your task is to let it go with honor, not bitterness. This mindset nurtures joy in a new way. You don't need everything to last to feel grateful for it. You start noticing small things, a kind word, a warm evening, the comfort of a familiar scent, and instead of trying to hold on, you give thanks. Not because you earned them, but because you see their temporary nature. And in that seeing, your heart opens wider. It also makes you more generous. When you realize that nothing truly belongs to you, you feel less afraid to share your time, your attention, your presence. You know that holding tightly doesn't preserve things. It only isolates them. But when you offer freely, without ownership, you feel more connected. You become part of the flow, not a barrier to it. This applies to success and praise too. Any recognition you receive is a reflection of timing, luck, and support, just as much as it is of effort. It's borrowed glory, and that's not an insult. It's a reminder to stay humble, to honor those who lifted you, who inspired you, who showed up when it mattered most. You are not the full cause of your wins, but you can be a grateful participant. Even your breath is on loan. You don't control when it begins or when it ends. You don't earn the next inhale. It's given. And with that awareness comes reverence. You treat your body with more care. You rest with more intention. You move with more presence, because you know nothing here is permanent, not even the rhythm that keeps you alive. And the thoughts you believe are yours, they too are borrowed. From books, from conversations, from moments you didn't expect to shape you. Your ideas are not formed in isolation. They come from the collective, the invisible network of human history and culture and memory. This doesn't diminish you, it connects you. You are part of an ancient chain, carrying forward what you've received, reshaping it with your voice and passing it on. You can begin to live each day as if it's borrowed time, not in fear, but in gratitude. You wake up and realize nothing is promised, nothing is owed, and that truth sharpens your focus. It softens your heart. It makes you more patient with others because you realize their presence is temporary too. Their flaws, their frustrations, their kindness. It will all shift, so you stop wasting energy on control and begin offering presence instead. This awareness also lightens regret. You see that not everything that slipped through your fingers was meant to stay. Some things leave before you're ready. Some lessons end mid-sentence. But the beauty of borrowed time is that it's still real. Even the incomplete was full while it lasted. Letting go becomes easier when you stop believing that things ever truly belonged to you. You begin to move through life not as a collector, but as a witness. Someone who watches with care, who touches lightly, who bows to the sacredness of a fleeting experience instead of trying to hold it down. And when you feel overwhelmed by loss, this understanding becomes your anchor. You don't deny the ache, but you stop fighting the rhythm. You remember, everything here is temporary. Everyone here is passing through, including you. And that's not tragic. It's a shared condition, a universal truth. It links you to every being who has ever lived and loved and let go. The more you live this way, the more resilient you become. You don't need constant comfort to stay grounded. You can welcome discomfort because you know it won't last. You can sit with beauty even when it's fading. You can meet change with respect instead of resistance. This way of living doesn't make you passive, it makes you responsive. You stop clinging to the past. You stop obsessing over the future. You meet the moment as it comes, with open hands. And that is where peace begins, not in control, but in cooperation with what is. There's nothing weak about surrender. It's the deepest form of strength. To say, I am not the center, but I am part of something vast. To say, This isn't mine, but I will hold it with care while it's here. That's not giving up, it's waking up. And when the day ends, you rest more easily. Not because everything went the way you planned, but because you were there for it. You received it. You honored it. You didn't take it for granted. So tonight, hold your breath like a gift. Listen to the quiet like a friend. And know, with every part of you, that nothing you experience truly belongs to you. And that is exactly what makes it so deeply worth treasuring. To live as if nothing belongs to you is to live with a lighter heart. When you stop grasping, everything becomes more vivid. You savor more. You listen better. You feel deeper. Because you're not trying to make anything stay. You're simply allowing it to be here, now. And when it leaves, as all things do, you don't chase it. You let it go with grace. But letting go is often misunderstood. People think it has to be dramatic. A sharp goodbye, a forced release, a sudden end. We imagine strength means detaching with cold certainty. But the truth is softer than that. Letting go, at its most powerful, doesn't come with noise. It comes slowly, quietly, gently, like ice melting in an open palm. This is the rhythm of surrender. Not ripping away, but softening. Not pushing back, but allowing what no longer needs to stay to dissolve on its own. Like an ice cube, turning into water. Not with a fight, but with the natural warmth of life itself. Melting teaches us everything we need to know about change. It shows us how form turns into flow, how structure becomes softness, and how holding on too tightly only delays the inevitable without preventing it. Because no matter how long you grip the ice, it will still melt. The question is whether you meet that process with resistance or with reverence. This image, the ice cube melting, is a mirror for every experience we try to hold past its time. Relationships that no longer align, expectations that no longer serve, versions of ourselves we've outgrown. You can keep trying to freeze them in place, but life keeps warming them anyway. Because life is motion, and everything within it is made to change. We often confuse control with care. We think that holding on tightly shows love, that resisting change is proof of commitment. But in truth, the deepest care comes from presence, not pressure. You can hold someone with an open hand and still love them fiercely. You can release a dream with gratitude, not defeat. You can watch something melt and still honor what it was. This is the wisdom of impermanence, not as a harsh truth, but as a quiet invitation. You are not here to preserve every moment. You are here to meet it fully and then let it pass. And the more gently you can do this, the more peace you find in the spaces where certainty once stood. Letting go gently doesn't mean giving up. It means tuning in, listening, noticing when the energy has shifted, when the effort no longer nourishes, when the story has reached its natural conclusion, even if the ending is quiet. It means allowing the shape of something to change without needing to force it back. There is grace in this kind of release. It is a skill, not a weakness. To loosen your grip without bitterness, to bless the moment without needing it to last. To soften, not because you don't care, but because you've learned to trust the process of life more than your desire to control it. Melting doesn't rush. It responds to warmth. And in the same way, your letting go doesn't need to be fast. It only needs to be honest. It only needs to begin with the willingness to stop resisting what's already in motion. Some days you'll feel yourself softening without even trying. A belief you used to fight for now feels less urgent. A boundary you once feared now feels natural. This is how you know something is melting. Not through force, but through quiet readiness. You're not abandoning yourself, you're evolving. Letting go in this way also makes room for what's next. When your hands are clenched around what was, they can't receive what's arriving. But when you release, you create space, not empty space, but open space. And that openness becomes your strength, your foundation, your freedom. Even your thoughts follow this rhythm. A fear rises, stays for a while, then begins to dissolve. A judgment forms, lingers, then fades when no longer fed. When you stop clinging to every thought, they start to melt on their own. Not because you forced them away, but because you gave them no resistance. This applies to emotions too. The pain you try to suppress stays frozen, but when you sit with it, breathe with it, welcome it, it begins to shift. The sadness softens, the anger unravels, the grief, though it remains, becomes easier to carry, not because it's gone, but because it's moving, and movement is healing. Living this way transforms how you see endings. They're no longer failures or losses, they are natural dissolutions. Like ice meeting warmth, like water returning to flow. You stop fearing endings because you know they don't erase what came before, they simply release it into something new. There's also a deep kindness in letting go gently, not just toward others, but toward yourself. You no longer shame yourself for needing time, for feeling attached, for taking small steps. You stop demanding instant detachment and start practicing slow release. And in that softness, self-compassion grows. Sometimes the hardest part is not letting go of a thing, but letting go of your attachment to how it was supposed to feel. You grieve the version of joy you thought you'd have, the safety you expected, the certainty you depended on, but even those melt with time if you allow them to. There is no right pace for this process, no formula. What melts in seconds for one person might take years for another. And that's okay. What matters is the direction of your heart. Are you moving toward release or away from it? Are you resisting the natural thaw or surrendering to it? This isn't about becoming numb. It's about becoming open, open to change, open to softness, open to what comes when you stop holding so tightly, because what comes next may not look like what you lost, but it may bring you peace in a new form. When you begin to live like this, your relationship to effort changes. You no longer see life as something to conquer. You stop chasing perfect outcomes. You stop needing constant control. Instead, you become more like water. You flow, you adapt, you melt into each moment with care, not clinging. This way of being is not passive, it's responsive. You don't give up your agency, you simply use it differently. Less pushing, more presence, less grasping, more trust. And in that trust, a quieter strength begins to grow. You learn to speak more gently, even to yourself. You stop pressuring your healing. You stop demanding that you feel better before you're ready. Instead, you begin to notice the small signs of thaw. A softer thought, a deeper breath, a longer pause between triggers. You also start to notice how others are melting in their own time. You stop expecting everyone to move at your pace. You respect their unfolding. You witness their thaw without judgment. And this makes you more connected, not because you're the same, but because you share the rhythm of release. Even joy melts. The high moment, the laughter, the ease, it passes. And that's not sad. That's what makes it honest. You hold it with light hands. You let it fill you without needing it to last. And because you don't cling, it leaves a trace of warmth instead of a scar of longing. The world around you is always changing shape. The ice of winter turns to the rain of spring. The frost on the window melts into light. Nature doesn't resist this, and when you live in alignment with it, your heart begins to soften too. At the end of a long day, the invitation remains. Let go, not with force, but with grace. Let what wants to melt, melt. Let what's ready to flow, flow. There's no need to hold so tightly anymore. Not because it didn't matter, but because it mattered so much. You're willing to release it gently. Rest in that knowing. Let it guide you, not as a rule, but as a rhythm. One that says, nothing needs to stay frozen forever. Not the pain, not the hope, not even the version of you that believed it all had to be permanent. Let it melt. Let it change. Let it become water. Let it become peace. Letting go with gentleness creates space for what the world so rarely talks about. The quiet truth that most things, including ourselves, will be forgotten. Not in a bitter, hopeless way, but in a way that returns us to what's real. After all the striving, after all the noise, after even the most cherished moments have melted into the past, what's left is not how long we are remembered, but how fully we lived while we were here. There is something honest and deeply relieving in accepting that your footsteps will disappear. The things you tried so hard to preserve, the work you poured yourself into, the version of yourself you hoped would be known and seen, all of it fades. Names once spoken every day eventually become dust on paper. Stories told again and again are one day told no more. Faces that filled rooms with light vanish from memory. And when you truly see this, something inside you softens. Not because it doesn't matter, but because it was never meant to last. That has always been the nature of life. Not permanence, but presence. The need to leave a legacy is often built from fear. Fear that you will not have mattered unless someone remembers. Fear that you must build something lasting to prove your worth. But what if the real gift isn't being remembered, but being alive while you're here? When you realize that your importance will pass, you stop needing to prove it. You become less focused on making a mark and more interested in making contact with others, with life, with this moment. You begin to care less about being seen and more about truly seeing, less about being admired and more about being honest. This doesn't mean you stop creating or contributing. It simply shifts your intention. You no longer write to be remembered. You write because it moves something in you. You don't offer kindness to be praised. You do it because kindness feels aligned. You stop needing to protect your name and instead focus on protecting your integrity. That's the quiet freedom of not needing to be unforgettable. Even the people who shape history eventually disappear from it. The most influential lives are still stories told by others, edited by time, reduced to highlights. No one is remembered in full. No one's truth survives completely intact, and the more you accept this, the more you let go of the pressure to control how you'll be remembered. You can't. No one can. But you can choose how fully you show up now, how deeply you listen, how gently you hold the moment. Those things don't need legacy to matter. They matter in the living, in the way your presence changes the quality of a room, in the way your touch brings comfort, in the way your laughter reminds someone they're not alone. These are not achievements. They are expressions, and they dissolve like everything else. But while they're here, they are everything. The idea of obscurity frightens the ego. It whispers, "What if no one remembers me? What if all I built disappears?" But the soul has a different voice, one that says, "Let it disappear, let it all return to the earth. You were never here to be remembered. You were here to feel, to grow, to give what you could, and then to let it all go." And in that voice, you begin to find peace. You understand that obscurity is not emptiness. It is the natural return. Just as waves wash away footprints in the sand, time washes away all marks. Not as an insult, but as part of the cycle. This understanding doesn't strip life of meaning, it brings it closer. When you no longer try to carve your name into history, you start to live with more humility. You ask better questions, not "Will they remember me?" but "Did I love well?" Not "Did I win enough?" but "Did I stay kind through loss?" These questions are lighter. They lead to a deeper life. Living with this awareness changes the way you define success. It becomes less about being known and more about being true. Less about building something large and more about building something honest. A conversation that mattered. A moment of silence that helped someone breathe. A walk taken slowly because there was no rush to get somewhere important. This also shifts how you see others. When you stop trying to be seen forever, you become more present with the people who are in front of you now. You stop needing to outshine. You stop comparing. You realize that everyone, in their own quiet way, is passing through. And the most sacred thing you can offer is your attention, not your status. This freedom from personal legacy also quiets the constant urge to leave something behind. You start to see that your presence is enough. You don't need to be a monument. You don't need to be a chapter in someone's book. You only need to be awake to your life. Even if no one remembers the details later, they mattered while they were happening. That's what counts. The world will move on, even from the most beautiful things. That's not a failure. It's a rhythm. Trees fall, rivers shift. Cities are built and forgotten. The same will happen to what you create. But if it was done with sincerity, then it fulfilled its purpose. It offered beauty while it could. And then it returned to silence. Even your deepest experiences, grief, love, joy, will fade in memory. They will not remain sharp forever, but they shape you as they pass through, and you, in turn, shape the world around you, not with lasting marks, but with momentary presence, like footsteps that disappear but still change the path while they were there. There is deep rest in this perspective. You stop trying to hold your life together like it's a permanent structure. You let it be what it is, a momentary dance. You show up with care. You speak with sincerity. You let go when it's time, and in doing so, you become more fully alive. Even the fear of death softens in this light. If your importance was never meant to be eternal, then your ending doesn't have to be feared. It becomes part of the arc, not a disruption, but a return. You gave what you could. You stayed as long as you were given, and then you let go, just as everything does. This awareness also deepens gratitude. You no longer take your time for granted. You no longer assume you'll always have another chance to say the thing, to feel the moment, to offer the kindness. So you begin to act more often. You speak more gently. You stop putting off joy. Even the smallest gestures begin to feel sacred. A hand on a shoulder, a message sent without expecting a reply, a shared silence under the sky. These things do not need to last. They only need to be true while they are happening. That's what gives them their power. You may still create, you may still build, but you'll do so from a place of freedom, not fear. Not to be remembered, but to express. Not to be praised, but to share. And when it's time to move on, you'll let it fade, because you'll know it was never yours to keep. To be forgotten is not to be erased. It is to be returned to stillness, to the great mystery that carries us all. It is to know that your life was never about standing apart, but about being fully part of what passes through. You don't have to make your life unforgettable. You only have to make it real. And in doing so, you will have lived fully, even if your footsteps disappear. If your footsteps can disappear and still be meaningful, then maybe your creations don't need to last to matter either. Maybe the beauty is in the making, not the memory. Maybe what you build is not for keeping, but for offering. And once it's given, it returns to the same silence from which it came. That silence is not a loss. It's a teacher. A space where you begin to understand that the art of living is not about permanence, but participation. There's an ancient practice where this truth is made visible. Monks spend days, sometimes weeks, creating intricate sand mandalas, patterns so precise they seem impossible. Grain by grain, they shape something breathtaking. Color by color, detail by detail. And then, when it's complete, they sweep it away, not out of disrespect, but out of reverence. Reverence for impermanence. Reverence for what it means to create without clinging. The ritual is not about loss, it's about presence. You build, knowing it will end. You give your focus, your care, your energy, not for lasting impact, but for the act itself. This is a practice of non-attachment at its highest level. Not to reject beauty, but to hold it with open hands. To understand that the purpose of creating is not to preserve, but to express. And when the expression is finished, you bow and you let it go. That's the essence of the mandala, and it mirrors something we're all invited to remember. Nothing we make is meant to stay. Living this way means building your life like a sand mandala. You pour your heart into your work, your love, your art. You show up fully. You do it with care. But you release the outcome. You stop measuring value by how long something lasts. You start seeing worth in the temporary. You realize that beauty is not reduced by its impermanence. It is defined by it. This way of being changes how you relate to effort. You no longer work only for recognition. You create because it's your nature to create. You serve because it aligns with your values, not because it ensures praise. You give not to be remembered, but because giving feels true. Your actions become less about control and more about contribution. The practice of non-clinging is not cold detachment. It's radical presence. It's giving your full attention to something while knowing you won't keep it. This includes people. This includes moments. This includes parts of yourself that will not come back. And when you embrace this, you stop trying to make life hold still. You become more fluid, more present, more gentle. You still build relationships, pursue dreams, and share what matters to you. But you no longer panic when things shift. You no longer collapse when something ends, because you know it was never supposed to last forever. It was supposed to be honored while it was here. This mindset softens grief, not by removing it, but by changing its shape. When something you love dissolves, a relationship, a season, a role, you feel the ache, but you also see the grace. You know it served its purpose. You remember that it was created like the mandala, with care, with beauty, with intention, and then with release. You also stop fearing failure in the same way. If everything dissolves, then perfection loses its grip. You try, you learn, you create, and when it's time, you sweep the sand and begin again. Not because it didn't matter, but because starting again is part of the cycle. Each attempt carries wisdom. Each effort is part of a deeper pattern that isn't meant to be frozen. Living like this invites deep humility. You stop pretending you can control the arc of your life. You stop trying to freeze what's meant to move. Instead, you become someone who touches the world lightly but fully. Someone who leaves behind no heavy imprint, but many light moments of presence. And it's not just about creating art. It's about how you relate to every area of life. Your relationships are a kind of mandala. They are formed through shared time, shared care, shared energy. And then they change, they dissolve. People drift or grow apart or pass on. This doesn't mean the connection failed, it means it completed its shape. Even your thoughts form patterns like sand. You focus, you gather, you shape your understanding. And then something shifts. A new experience, a new question, and the pattern dissolves. You don't resist, you let it fall, and you begin again with new insight. This also applies to identity. You are not the same person you were 5 years ago. Even now, you're forming a new version of yourself through choice, experience, and presence. And at some point, this version will dissolve too. This isn't something to mourn, it's something to embrace. You are an unfolding design, not static, not fixed, always changing, always reforming. The wisdom of the mandala lives in every natural cycle. Flowers bloom, then fall. Waves rise, then break. Stars appear, then vanish. This rhythm is not a problem to solve, it's a truth to live by. And the more you align with it, the less resistance you feel. Resistance shows up when you try to make things permanent, when you hold too tightly, when you believe something must stay for it to be real. But the mandala teaches that the deepest things in life often leave no trace. A glance, a moment of silence, a shared breath. You don't need proof that something mattered. Its presence was the meaning. This understanding shifts your focus from outcomes to intention. You start caring more about how you create, not just what you create. Were you kind? Were you honest? Were you present? Did you offer something of yourself, even knowing it wouldn't last? These are the questions that shape a life built on sacred impermanence. You begin to notice how this approach changes your nervous system too. When you stop clinging, you stop bracing. Your body relaxes, your breath deepens. You're no longer trying to outrun loss. You're learning how to live inside it, with peace, with grace. Even love becomes more expansive. You stop loving people to keep them. You love them because you can, because it feels true, because that love itself is the pattern you're shaping, grain by grain. And when the wind comes and the form changes, you don't hold a grudge. You bow, you thank the moment, you let it go. This is not passive living, it is deeply engaged. But your engagement is rooted in presence, not possession. You become someone who shows up fully but doesn't grasp. Someone who builds beauty and then blesses its disappearance. Someone who honors creation and honors its return to formlessness. And when you face loss again, as you will, you'll feel it deeply. But it won't break you in the same way, because you'll know the pattern. You'll know this is what sand does. It holds shape. Then it returns. And that returning is not erasure, it is release. So when you wake tomorrow, when you speak, when you give, when you build, do it like the monks with their mandalas, with care, with focus, with the quiet willingness to let it all go when the time comes. Not because it didn't matter, but because it did. And that is the beauty. That is the gift. That is the whole point. To create while knowing it won't last. To live while knowing it's all temporary. To give everything to the moment, and then step back, bow your head, and let the wind take it. Letting go of what you create, like the sand mandala, frees your heart from needing to be seen for it to be real. You build with care, even knowing it will vanish. And that same truth applies not only to what you offer the world, but to how the world receives it. No matter how carefully you live, how gently you speak, how sincerely you try, some people will still misunderstand you. And when that happens, your peace depends not on clearing your name, but on learning to let those echoes fade. Being misunderstood hurts, not just because someone gets it wrong, but because it touches something deep. A longing to be known, to be reflected back accurately. When that's disrupted, when your intentions are questioned, when your heart is misread, it's easy to feel exposed, dismissed, or unseen. But what if this experience, painful as it is, holds a hidden gift? Not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. Not every judgment needs to be addressed. Sometimes, the most powerful response is to remain steady, quiet, and rooted in what you know to be true. Because most judgments are temporary. They rise quickly and fade just as fast. Like echoes, they sound loud for a moment, then dissolve into silence. When someone misjudges you, the instinct is to explain, to fix the image, to set the record straight. But often, this only deepens the noise. You use your energy trying to control what cannot be controlled, another person's perception. And in doing so, you lose yourself. You become entangled in a version of you that only exists in someone else's mind. Peace begins when you recognize the limits of being understood. Even those closest to you will never fully know your inner world. They can love you, support you, try to hear you, but they still see through their own filter, and that filter is shaped by their past, their fears, their assumptions, just as yours is. This doesn't mean connection is impossible. It means that clarity between people is always partial, and that misunderstanding is not a sign of failure. It's a natural part of human interaction. You can't control how others hear you, but you can control how tightly you grip their interpretation. The moment you stop needing everyone to get it, you free yourself. You return to your center. You stop chasing validation and start living from a deeper place, from self-trust, from quiet alignment. And in that place, you begin to see the misunderstanding not as a wound, but as a wave. It rises, it breaks, it disappears. This shift is especially powerful when the misunderstanding is sharp, when someone assigns motives to you that you don't recognize, when your silence is called cold, when your kindness is mistaken for weakness. In those moments, the urge to defend yourself can be overwhelming, but often, the more you explain, the more you feel erased. The truth of who you are becomes secondary to the story someone else has decided to tell. In time, you learn that stillness is not surrender, it is clarity, a refusal to get pulled into a storm that isn't yours. You choose to stand in your own knowing, to let your actions speak, to let time clarify what words cannot. Most people don't need to be convinced. They need to watch, and they will eventually see what they couldn't before. But even if they don't, you can survive that. You can remain whole, even in the face of being misread. Because your worth is not found in someone else's understanding. It is not measured by how accurately others describe you. Your worth lives in how you treat others, how you stay true to your values, and how gently you move through life, even when misjudged. This is where spiritual maturity grows, in the space where you allow others to get it wrong without letting that harden your heart. You don't become smaller to avoid being misunderstood. You don't become louder just to correct the record. You stay open, you stay honest, you keep walking. The truth is, everyone has been misunderstood. Everyone has felt unseen. And those moments, while painful, can become invitations to return inward. To clarify, not for the world, but for yourself. Who am I when no one is watching? What matters to me when no one agrees? There is a kind of peace that blooms when you no longer need agreement to feel grounded. It's quiet. It's steady. It doesn't shout. It knows that misunderstanding comes and goes, just like applause does. Neither defines your path. Neither should control your energy. This practice also deepens compassion. You begin to see that you too have misunderstood others. You've heard things with ears clouded by emotion. You've judged without knowing the full story. You've created narratives that turned out to be incomplete, and this awareness softens your response. You stop blaming others for being human. You let space exist between reaction and response. Misunderstandings don't mean relationships must end. Sometimes they lead to deeper conversations. Sometimes they invite honesty that had been buried, but only if both people are willing. And when they're not, you learn to walk away without bitterness. Not because it didn't matter, but because you've outgrown the need to be fully seen by everyone. The greatest freedom comes when you realize that even if someone forgets you, mislabels you, or writes you out of their story, none of that erases the integrity of your choices. You know what you meant, you know what you gave, and that knowing doesn't need an audience. This also changes how you show up in public spaces. You speak more freely. You stop editing your truth just to avoid criticism. You realize that no matter how careful you are, someone will misinterpret you. And so you stop shrinking. You tell the truth, not to control the response, but to stay aligned with who you are. This is not the same as becoming careless. It's the opposite. You become more responsible, more thoughtful, more present, because you're no longer performing. You speak to express, not to impress. And that shift brings an honesty that others can feel, even if they can't always name it. Over time, you realize that misunderstanding isn't something to fear, it's something to work with. It teaches you detachment. It teaches you to speak clearly and then let go. It teaches you to ground your worth in actions, not approval. And slowly, your fear of being misread becomes less sharp, less personal, more like weather. You still care, but you don't carry it the same way. You respond when it feels right and stay silent when it doesn't. You trust that your life, as a whole, will speak louder than any one opinion. And when the noise fades, what remains is not who they said you were, but who you became through it all. So when the echoes rise again, when someone gets it wrong, when your heart feels the sting of being unseen, breathe, return to your center, let the wave rise, let it crest, let it fall, and then step forward, quietly, without apology. Knowing the truth doesn't need to be shouted to be lived. There's a quiet strength in walking forward without needing to be understood. When you no longer chase explanations or approval, you start listening more deeply to life, to others, to the space around you. And that space, when you stop filling it with defense or noise, begins to teach you something, not through words, through rhythm, through silence, through the parts we often overlook. This isn't just something you feel in relationships or thoughts. You hear it most clearly in music. Music is built on what is heard, yes, but equally on what is not. The silence between the notes, the breath between verses, the moment after the sound fades, these are not empty spaces. They are where the meaning settles. Without them, even the most beautiful melody becomes crowded, heavy, shapeless. The pause creates the shape. The ending gives the notes their edge. The decay of sound is not a flaw, it is what lets the next phrase begin. Every piece of music carries within it the lesson of impermanence. From the first note, something is already disappearing. Even as it rises, it begins to fall. There's no effort to make it last longer than it should. Musicians know this. They don't fight the fade, they shape it. They lean into the letting go because it's part of what makes the sound whole. This is a direct reflection of life itself. Nothing you experience is made to stay at full volume forever. Joy swells, then softens. Grief crests, then rests. Love bursts into being, then transforms. We often focus on the intensity of moments, but their depth comes from the space around them. Like music, your life is not just a series of events. It is a rhythm, and silence is part of that rhythm. The pauses in music hold tension, release, anticipation, relief. A single moment of stillness between notes can carry more weight than the sound itself. It invites the listener inward. It opens a door to feeling, to memory, to breath. Without those spaces, the music would never land. In the same way, your life needs pauses, breaks in the movement, moments where nothing is happening and everything is shifting. These silences are not wasted time. They are sacred. They let emotions surface. They allow reflection to settle. When you rush past them, life becomes a blur. But when you welcome them, life becomes music. You begin to hear your own rhythm more clearly. You begin to see that nothing lasts, and that's exactly what gives it meaning. The decay of a note is one of the most powerful sounds in any composition. It lingers in the air after the peak has passed. It holds the emotion that the sharpness alone couldn't express. It teaches that endings are not sudden. They are slow releases. And in that slow fading, something honest is revealed, that the most beautiful things often leave gently, not with a crash, but with a whisper. This is how we let go, not by cutting off, but by allowing the tone to shift, the energy to move, the sound to fade. The same is true in love, in purpose, in healing. The most graceful changes are rarely abrupt. They unfold, they soften, they echo. Even the structure of music reflects impermanence. A piece begins, builds, peaks, then closes, and the audience never asks it to continue forever. They know it would lose its shape if it never stopped. The ending makes space for silence, which in turn allows the next piece to begin. This is not just good art, it's a map for living. When you resist silence, you live in noise. Constant activity, constant stimulation. You fear the quiet moments because they hold things you don't want to feel. But silence, like in music, is not absence. It is presence of a different kind. It's the space where insight arrives, where your nervous system exhales, where your spirit settles back into its natural rhythm. Music shows that even stillness has a pulse, a low hum of life underneath. And once you learn to listen for it, you begin to trust that silence is not empty. It's full of potential, full of messages, full of subtle changes. Just because it's quiet doesn't mean nothing is happening. The same applies to the quiet periods in your life, the pauses between relationships, the months where nothing big is unfolding, the days that feel slow or uneventful. These are not delays. They are part of the score. They are the rests that let the next melody form. When you fight them, you create dissonance. When you embrace them, you allow harmony. Decay is also part of beauty in music. Vibrato fading. A piano key slowly softening into nothing. A voice that holds its final note until it disappears into air. These are not endings to mourn, they are conclusions to honor. Without decay, nothing would feel real. Everything would be frozen, lifeless, artificial. This impermanence brings you into deeper connection with what's present. You begin to listen differently. You lean in. You know that what you're hearing won't repeat exactly the same way. That awareness pulls you into the now, not out of fear, but out of appreciation. You stop trying to hold on. You start allowing everything to pass through. Every concert ends. Every favorite song finishes. But you carry the feeling it gave you, not by freezing it, but by letting it dissolve fully. That's what gives it power, not that you captured it, but that you let it move through you. The same is true of every moment that leaves an imprint. You don't need to preserve it forever. You just need to be there for it while it lasts. Music doesn't apologize for its fading. It doesn't resist its own endings. It teaches you how to let go with elegance, with honesty, with awareness. And when you live like that, you begin to hear your own life in musical terms. You see patterns, you hear pauses, you stop rushing toward a climax and start noticing the beauty in the slow build, the quiet hold, the gentle release. Your relationships take on this rhythm too. Not every connection is meant to crescendo forever. Some begin quietly and end even more quietly. Some swell and then fade. But that doesn't mean they failed. It means they were complete in their own way. And when you let them go like a final note fading, you allow peace to take their place. The greatest works of music don't try to overwhelm you. They leave space. They use silence as a tool. They let some questions remain unanswered. And they trust that you, the listener, will find meaning in the whole, not just in the loudest parts. You can live like that too. You can let your story breathe. You can stop trying to explain every choice. You can rest between chapters. You can trust that not all beauty needs to be loud. Some of it is whispered. Some of it is felt only once. And that's enough. So the next time you find yourself in a moment that feels unfinished, remember the silence between notes, the pause that gives the melody shape, the space that holds the power of the entire song. You don't need to fill every gap. You just need to listen. Let the note fade. Let the silence settle. And trust with every part of you that the music of your life continues, not in a straight line, not in one unbroken sound, but in the rhythm of presence, of change, of letting each moment rise, fall, and then give way to the next. A note fades, the silence settles, and what's left is not emptiness, but meaning. A meaning carried not by volume, but by timing, texture, and presence. This is how life moves too, through phases, through quiet shifts, through roles that come and go like movements in a larger symphony. When you begin to listen to your life this way, you start to notice that your roles, however central they may seem, are also temporary. The parts you play in life feel personal. They feel permanent while you're in them. Parent, partner, sibling, friend, provider, helper. You shape your days around them. You make decisions through their lens. And often, without noticing, you begin to believe they define who you are. But every role is a costume, a necessary one, yes. But still, a costume, one that eventually no longer fits or fades or is passed on to someone else. And this realization is not loss, it's relief. Because when you understand that your roles are temporary, you stop trying to make them carry your identity. You stop attaching your worth to how well you perform. You stop needing to prove yourself through labels that were never meant to last. You begin to experience each role as a space to grow through, not a place to stay. Take parenting. For many, it becomes the center of life. The early years are full of constant giving, shaping, guiding, protecting. You're needed in ways that feel unending. But then, slowly, you're needed less. The routines change, the questions change, the distance grows. This isn't failure. It's the child growing into their own center. And the role you once held begins to dissolve. What remains is not the parent in title, but the love in presence. The wisdom shared, not imposed. The guidance offered, not demanded. You learn that you were never raising a version of yourself. You were tending to someone else's unfolding, and that unfolding continues with or without your full involvement. Letting go of the parenting role doesn't mean letting go of care. It means releasing control. It means allowing the relationship to evolve, to mature, to reflect mutual growth. And the more gently you can loosen your grip on the role, the more deeply you stay connected to the person beyond it. This applies to partnering as well. Relationships shift over time. What once felt like clear roles, caretaker, supporter, provider, can dissolve, reverse, or disappear altogether. Sometimes through growth, sometimes through separation, sometimes through loss. If you believe that your role within the relationship defines your worth, then change will feel like a threat. But if you understand the fluid nature of roles, then change becomes part of the rhythm. A partner is not a fixed identity. It's a dynamic, living exchange. One that asks you to keep showing up with curiosity, to keep rediscovering each other, to keep shedding the scripts you've outgrown. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is step out of the role you once played and meet the person across from you as they are now. Even the role of friend carries expectations that shift. You may be the one who listens, who helps, who leads, but over time, roles reverse or fade. Some friendships remain close, others become memories. And if you understand this as a natural part of life, you stop taking it personally. You let people drift in and out with grace rather than fear. You know your role in their story may be complete, and that doesn't diminish the bond that once was. Temporary roles also exist within your work, your service, your creative expression. You may be the expert in one setting and the learner in another, the guide today and the beginner tomorrow. When you stop attaching your identity to a specific role, you become more agile, more honest, more willing to evolve. This mindset removes the pressure to perform constantly. When you know that roles are not your essence, you can inhabit them more freely. You show up as a parent, a leader, a partner, not to fulfill an image, but to respond to what the moment asks. You don't cling to the mask. You don't fear the shift. You step in, you serve, and when it's time, you step out. This helps dissolve ego. Ego says, "This is who I am." Awareness says, "This is who I am being right now." One is rigid, the other is responsive, and responsiveness is where growth lives. When you're not locked into a role, you can adapt, you can listen, you can change your mind. It also deepens humility. You stop believing you're the only one who can do it, the only one who matters. You understand that others have played this role before you, and others will after you. You're part of a lineage, not a fixed point. You hold the space for a time, and then you pass it on. This view makes room for more compassion too. You begin to see others in the same light. You notice when someone is trapped in a role they no longer want. You recognize when someone is clinging to identity out of fear. And instead of judging, you meet them with understanding. You remember how hard it is to let go of what once gave you meaning. But meaning does not end when a role does. Meaning is carried in how you live through it, in the presence you bring, in the honesty you offer, in the care you give. Those things outlast the role itself. They're not tied to the name or the title. They're tied to the way you showed up. There's a freedom in recognizing that even the roles you love the most will pass. It allows you to be more fully in them. You stop holding back. You give your time, your effort, your heart, knowing that this part of your life is just that, a part, not the whole story. And when it ends, you can move forward without regret because you were truly there. Roles become burdens when you resist their change, when you try to freeze them in place, when you believe that your relevance depends on keeping them. But relevance is not rooted in role, it's rooted in presence. And presence moves with you, no matter what you're called. Even your role in your own life changes. You are not the same self from year to year. You carry different hopes, different needs, different strengths. Letting go of the pressure to be consistent frees you to be real, to be new, to be shaped by time instead of fighting it. This also creates more room for rest. You don't need to be on all the time. You can step out of the role. You can be soft. You can pause. You can let the identity fade without losing your sense of self. Because who you are is deeper than any name you wear. And when the time comes to enter a new phase, a new relationship, a new season, a new offering, you begin again with humility. You don't arrive needing to know everything. You show up willing to learn, to serve, to participate, knowing that this role too is temporary, that one day you will release it. And in that release, you will discover the next version of yourself. So be in your role fully. But do not confuse it with your being. Wear it with love, but not with fear. Let it guide you, but not confine you. And when it's time to let it go, Step out gently, with gratitude, knowing that every role was just a part of the greater movement. Not the definition of who you are, but a reflection of where you were called to grow. When a role ends, it doesn't just fade quietly, it often leaves echoes, attachments, unfinished emotions. Even after the function is gone, something lingers. Memories stay in the body, words remain in the mind. And the story, whether you've told it or not, lives in the spaces you return to again and again. Moving forward becomes difficult, not because the path ahead is blocked, but because the past hasn't yet been released. This is why rituals matter, not as a form of superstition or performance, but as an embodied way to mark a shift, a symbolic act that tells your inner world, it's time to loosen the grip, time to thank what was, time to return fully to the present. One of the most powerful rituals for this is burning old letters. Not just physical letters, but anything that holds energy you're ready to let go of. Messages never sent, notes written in pain, journals filled with emotions that have already served their purpose. Even memories written down just to be witnessed. Setting fire to them is not about forgetting, it's about honoring through release. Fire changes things, it transforms, it consumes without apology, but it doesn't erase meaning. What it does is allow what once held weight to become light. Ashes don't carry the same pull as paper soaked in emotion. The act of burning becomes a declaration. I have carried this far enough. I am not this story. I am ready to live from what's here now. This practice isn't about dramatics. It can be simple, quiet, intentional. You choose a safe space. You gather what needs releasing. You read it if you want. You feel the weight of what it meant. And then, with care, you burn it, watching the words curl, disappear, and dissolve into smoke. You don't force a feeling. You don't expect instant healing. You just allow the act to mark a change. Letting go often requires more than thought. It needs a gesture, something the body can understand. Symbolic rituals help anchor emotional truth. They bring the invisible into form, and that form gives shape to closure. This is not limited to letters. It could be objects tied to someone you've lost or outgrown, clothes that hold memories too heavy to carry, photos of a chapter you've long since left. When you're ready, releasing these with presence, not from rejection, but from respect, opens space. Space that's been waiting to be lived in again. Sometimes, what you need to burn isn't physical at all. It's an old version of yourself. The part of you that made choices from fear. The part that stayed silent too long. The identity you wore to survive, but no longer need. Writing to that version, naming what it carried, then letting it go. This too is a ritual of return. A return to the self you are now. Not polished, not perfect, but real and free. Not all goodbyes come with clear endings. Some require you to create your own. Because life moves fast and emotional closure doesn't always arrive on its own. You may never get the apology, the explanation, the understanding, but you can give yourself something more powerful, permission to stop waiting. Burning becomes that permission. Not to forget, but to stop feeding what no longer feeds you. You shift from holding the story to honoring the lesson. You no longer carry the wound as identity. You carry it as wisdom. There's something deeply grounding about watching fire work. It commands your attention. It demands presence. You can't multitask while you burn something that meant something to you. The mind focuses, the breath slows, time pauses, and in that pause, you find space not just to let go, but to understand why you held on. Rituals like this help the heart accept what the mind already knows. That it's okay to let it go. That clinging doesn't keep you safe, it keeps you stuck. And that release is not rejection, it's liberation. The most powerful rituals are not the most elaborate, they are the most honest. They don't need to be seen by others, they only need to be felt by you. Whether you do it with candlelight or in the morning sun, whether you write pages or just a single word, it's the intention that transforms. The choice to let the fire speak what you no longer need to carry. In many traditions, fire is seen as purifying. It's not violent, it's sacred. A bridge between form and formless, between holding and releasing. And when you engage with it this way, you feel the shift inside you. Something quiet settles, something tight loosens. You leave a little lighter than you arrived. And with this lightness, you begin to notice how much space the past had been taking up. How many decisions were shaped by old pain? How many patterns repeated not out of desire, but out of habit? Once you make the choice to let go, even symbolically, those habits lose their grip. This doesn't mean you forget the past. It means you stop letting it define your direction. The past becomes a path, not a prison. You can revisit it without becoming it. You can remember without being held back. Because now you've marked the transition. You've made the choice to live from today. Rituals of release teach you to pause, to name what mattered, to thank it, and to end it with care. This is not about deleting your history, it's about integrating it. The fire becomes a point of transformation, and transformation, at its core, is the most honest form of healing. You may need to repeat the act more than once. That's okay. Letting go is not a single decision. It's a process, a practice. Each time, a little more releases. Each time, you meet yourself with more truth. You can burn the words that were never said, the dreams that never came to be, the parts of you that tried so hard to be loved in ways you no longer seek. This is sacred work, not to erase the journey, but to honor the fact that you are no longer there. Afterward, there's often stillness, a strange quiet, sometimes even a sadness you didn't expect. Let that be. You're making space. And space always feels unfamiliar at first, but it's also where new life begins. So, when you feel the weight of what you've carried too long, know this: you have the right to let it go. You have the power to bless it as you release it. You have the strength to choose peace, not as a denial of what was, but as an invitation to what's now waiting. And in that choice, something shifts. The old story burns, the air clears, and what remains is not ashes, but clarity, not loss, but freedom, not an ending, but an opening. After the release, there is space. After the burning, there is quiet. And in that quiet, a new awareness can rise, not from the mind, but from the body. The simplicity of presence becomes louder. The past is no longer pulling at your sleeves. You begin to notice the most basic rhythm of life returning to center. The breath, the movement that never asks for attention, yet holds everything together. The breath enters, the breath leaves, and each cycle tells a truth that cannot be ignored. You are not permanent, and that, in itself, is a gift. Every inhale begins, fills, and disappears. Every exhale finishes what the body no longer needs. This cycle repeats again and again, without force, without ownership, without attachment. You cannot hold on to breath. The moment you try, you suffer. You suffocate. You are reminded immediately that release is not optional, it is required. The breath shows you this with every movement. Life does not accumulate breath, it flows it. You receive, you let go, you are filled, you are emptied, and every time you exhale, something dies, not in a dramatic way, but in a soft, constant way. Each breath marks the passing of time, the changing of cells, the unrepeatable rhythm of now. Most of the time, we are not aware of it. Breathing happens in the background until it doesn't. And in the moments when we do notice it, we begin to understand something deeper. This simple act is the most consistent reminder of impermanence we are given. The breath is always leaving us, and yet we never stop beginning again. This pattern invites awareness not just of life, but of death, not as a distant event, but as something always present. Each breath is a mirror of mortality. It reminds you that everything you experience has a start and an end. The people you love, the feelings you cherish, the moments that move you. None of them are fixed. None can be held longer than their time. Breath does not argue with this. It accepts it. It teaches you to be here, fully, without needing to grasp, without needing to hold what will not stay. And once you begin to feel the breath this way, you begin to feel everything this way. You no longer take the next moment for granted. You no longer assume there will be another opportunity to say what you mean, to show what you feel, to begin what you've been waiting to start. The breath reminds you that delay is a form of illusion, that now is the only place where anything real can happen. This awareness creates urgency, but not panic. It creates clarity. You begin to sense what matters most, not from pressure, but from peace. The breath becomes a compass. It leads you back to simplicity, to stillness, to honesty. It helps you see through distraction. It helps you hear what your life has been asking of you. And because the breath is always with you, this reminder is always available. You don't need a special practice. You only need to stop, to notice, to feel the movement rise, peak, and fall, over and over, without rush, without delay. Even the moments that feel hard, fear, loss, uncertainty, become more bearable when you meet them with breath. Not because the feeling disappears, but because you have a rhythm to hold on to. You can breathe through what feels overwhelming. You can soften into what you cannot fix. The breath does not need things to change. It only needs you to stay present. This kind of awareness creates a deep, grounded courage. You begin to accept that death is not a failure. It is the shape of things, the natural closing of what once opened, the exhale after the inhale, the finish that gives the experience its meaning. Every spiritual tradition speaks of the breath, not because it is mystical, but because it is real. It is always available. It brings the mind back when it drifts. It steadies the body when it shakes. It reminds you that being alive is not about how long you last, but how fully you meet each passing moment. This rhythm also reveals the truth about control. You do not choose your first breath, and you will not choose your last. But between them, you are given countless chances to meet what is, not to master it, not to perfect it, just to meet it. When you truly feel the impermanence of the breath, you begin to value the ordinary, the small, the fleeting. You begin to feel reverence for the moments that pass without announcement, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the sound of someone laughing in the other room, the stillness before you fall asleep. You stop waiting for big experiences. You stop demanding more than this. The breath brings you into gratitude, not through ideas, but through embodiment. When you feel your breath, you remember that you are still here, that this is not guaranteed, that this is sacred. Gratitude doesn't need a list. It needs attention. It needs awareness of what you've been given, even as it slips away. This presence is not about stillness alone. It's about movement that carries meaning. The breath reminds you that action doesn't need to be rushed, that silence doesn't mean nothing is happening, that sometimes the most transformative moments come quietly between the things you thought mattered most. You also learn that not every breath will feel easy. Some will be shallow, some tight, some interrupted by emotion. And all of this is part of the truth. You don't have to make the breath perfect. You only need to stay with it. You only need to allow it to be what it is. Over time, this becomes your baseline for awareness. You begin to see everything through the lens of impermanence, not as a threat, but as a teacher. A loved one hugs you, and you feel the moment more deeply because you know it won't last. You sit with someone in pain, and you stay present because you know this, too, will shift. You stop needing to fix. You start being with. The beauty of the breath is in its simplicity. It doesn't argue. It doesn't demand. It continues whether you pay attention or not. And when you do pay attention, it reveals more than thought ever could. It becomes a doorway to understanding, not just of the body, but of the whole experience of living. You begin to see how much you've missed while rushing, how many breaths were taken without noticing, how much of life has slipped by while you were elsewhere. And instead of feeling guilt, you feel grateful, because now you are returning. Now you are listening. Even grief changes shape when you meet it with breath. You begin to see that what you've lost is not gone completely. It lives in the space it left, in the breath you take when you remember, in the silence that holds the love. Breath doesn't erase grief. It holds it gently. It lets it move without becoming frozen. Mortality is not a curse. It is clarity. It is the frame that gives shape to every joy, every lesson, every connection. Without it, nothing would matter. Without endings, beginnings would hold no weight. So, when you feel overwhelmed by the speed of life or the weight of uncertainty, return to this truth. Breath is always here. It is your anchor, your teacher, your mirror. Each inhale a reminder of arrival, each exhale a practice in surrender. And when your last breath comes, whenever that may be, it will not be a punishment. It will be the final rhythm in a song that has always known how to begin and how to end. You won't need to fight it. You will have practiced for it every single day, and until then you breathe, with attention, with presence, with quiet awe at how something so small can hold everything. The breath fades and rises again, a quiet cycle reminding you that nothing stays. And while your body carries this truth every moment, it's easy to forget in the noise of modern life. There's another world you inhabit now, A place not made of air or skin or shared space, but of posts, profiles, messages, and curated memories. A world where identity is shaped, displayed, and echoed long after the moment has passed. Yet even here, impermanence remains. Digital life, for all its reach and repetition, also fades. You leave behind a trail, but that trail is not eternal. Your online presence feels lasting because it is stored. Photos, words, thoughts, all archived, clickable, searchable. But permanence here is an illusion. Platforms change, algorithms forget, pages disappear. And just like old letters or fading conversations, even your most meaningful digital expressions become digital dust. Think of the posts that once felt urgent, the messages you rewrote again and again, the photos you chose carefully, the captions you timed. They now live buried in a feed no one scrolls. You may have forgotten them, but they're still there, until they're not. Profiles get deactivated. Accounts close. Servers fail. One day, a username that once meant something will return not found. This isn't a loss to grieve. It's a truth to understand. Your online self is a version of you, shaped in moments, shared in fragments, influenced by timing, mood, and attention. But it is never the whole. It can't be, and it's not meant to last longer than your living breath. The digital version of you is a collection of snapshots. Useful, maybe, expressive perhaps, but never fixed, never full. Digital identity is curated, often unconsciously. You post what you want to remember or what you want others to remember. You try to tell a story that feels complete. But just like every role in physical life, this story too shifts. What you posted 5 years ago may no longer reflect your truth. You may even feel disconnected from the voice that once typed those words. This is natural. Growth means leaving behind echoes. Even the connections you form online reflect this passing nature. Conversations that once brought comfort drift into silence. Shared laughter in comment threads gives way to inactivity. Group chats that felt like lifelines become archives no one opens. And when you try to revisit them, they no longer hold the same energy. The timing has passed. The moment is gone. This teaches something important. Presence matters more than permanence. The value of your digital expression isn't in how long it stays online. It's in the intention and sincerity behind it. You write because you feel. You share because you care. But you don't control what stays, how it's interpreted, or who still sees it tomorrow. And that's okay. Your digital footprint is not your essence. It is a reflection, a pattern, a trace. And like footsteps in sand, it eventually disappears. What seemed important online may vanish from memory, both yours and others. This does not lessen your impact. It simply means that your real presence, how you showed up in someone's life, even for a second, has always meant more than the post itself. Understanding this changes how you engage. You begin to value depth over visibility. You post less for recognition and more for expression. You stop measuring connection by likes or follows and start noticing who stays with you beyond the feed. The friendships that move offline. The messages that turn into real care. The presence that doesn't need performance. This awareness also invites more freedom. When you know your online self is temporary, you stop clinging to image. You become less afraid of changing your mind publicly, less afraid of disappearing for a while, less caught in needing to explain everything. You understand that you're allowed to evolve even if your timeline shows an old version of you. You are not obligated to keep performing a past identity. Just because it's documented doesn't mean it must be preserved. You are allowed to archive, delete, start again. You are allowed to move forward without updating anyone. Silence online is not failure. It is often a return to truth. Sometimes the fear isn't about being seen. It's about being forgotten. But impermanence in digital life is not erasure. It is movement. It is release. Just as breath disappears after it nourishes, your words online do their part, then pass on. Someone might read them and feel understood. Someone else might never see them, but that doesn't mean they were wasted. Even in digital death, there's clarity. Think of the accounts of people who've passed away. Their profiles remain like shrines, some visited, others untouched. Comments continue years later, a strange echo, a space between memory and presence. But even these too one day fade. Platforms close, policies change, technology advances. What was once permanent becomes unreachable. This realization isn't meant to sadden, it is meant to soften your grip. You do not need to be remembered online to be meaningful in real life. The moments you share are enough while they're here. They don't need to live forever. You can care deeply, write truly, post honestly, and then let it all go. When you understand this, your relationship to attention also shifts. You don't need viral validation to feel real. You don't need constant interaction to feel loved. You know that real impact happens quietly, often invisibly. Someone may read what you wrote in a moment you'll never know about. Someone may be comforted by your presence without ever telling you. These are the gifts that don't show in metrics, but they matter most. And you too carry digital echoes from others, messages that moved you, a quote that stayed with you, a video that made you feel less alone. These may be gone now or hard to find, but they left something in you. You carry the trace, not the timestamp. This is how presence works, even in a world of screens. Knowing this, you may begin to live differently, not with less care, but with clearer values. You stop measuring your life by what is posted. You start showing up more where no one is watching. You build more off-screen. You find joy in things not shared. You let the sacred stay unrecorded. This doesn't mean leaving digital spaces. It means moving through them with awareness, knowing their limits, honoring their potential, and never mistaking them for the whole. The screen can amplify, but it cannot replace the pulse of real connection, the presence of breath, the feeling of a shared moment that lives only once. Digital dust is not a flaw. It's a mirror, a modern way to see impermanence at work, a reminder that even here, in the places we thought we could preserve everything, nothing truly stays. And maybe it was never meant to. So post if you want. Share what feels real. But don't hold too tightly. Let your online self come and go. Let your presence speak more than your profile. Let what's alive be more important than what's archived, because when it's all gone, when the page goes blank, what will matter most is not what you left online, but who you became while you were here. When digital echoes fade, what remains isn't the archive. It's your awareness of what mattered while it was alive. The same is true within you. Beneath the scroll, beyond the profile, your inner world is changing too. Desires that once felt urgent now pass with little pull. The cravings that used to steer your choices lose their hold. This shift is quiet and often unnoticed until it's already happened. But it speaks to something essential. Even your desires are not permanent. Even your longings dissolve. You may not feel it while chasing something, a new experience, a flavor, a person, an idea, but each pull eventually softens. What you once thought you couldn't live without becomes less important. Sometimes it disappears entirely. And this is not failure, it's nature. It's proof that even the most deeply felt hunger has a rhythm of its own. Nothing remains desirable forever. Start with something simple. Taste. The foods you once loved as a child, those strange combinations, those sweet or salty fixes, they probably don't call you the same way now. The craving isn't gone because you disciplined it out of yourself. It faded on its own. Your body changed. Your palate shifted. What once brought comfort may now feel overwhelming. What once excited you now feels too much. And yet, while it lasted, it felt essential. The same evolution happens in art. Music that once lit up every part of you now feels distant. Books that once echoed your soul may not move you the same way. Movies that once felt profound may now feel dated. This isn't a loss of appreciation. It's a reflection of growth. You are not static. Your sensitivity evolves. Your emotional needs change. Your mind seeks different rhythms. You become available for new meaning. Even in love, this truth arrives with time. The type of person you once felt drawn to may not move you in the same way. The qualities you once found magnetic may no longer spark the same interest. Sometimes this shift happens gradually, sometimes suddenly. But always, it reflects the deeper truth that desire is not a fixed map. It is a living pattern, one that adapts to who you're becoming. When you realize that your tastes are temporary, you stop building identity around them. You no longer define yourself by what you crave. You become less afraid of change in yourself and in others. You start to listen more closely to the present moment, rather than clinging to the past version of what you once wanted. This awareness brings freedom. You no longer judge the ending of a desire as the loss of something vital. You begin to see it as a doorway. One desire ending means space for something else to arrive. And that space isn't empty. It's sacred. It's an invitation to ask, what is true now? What speaks to me here? Desire often masquerades as permanence. It arrives with urgency. It feels convincing. But no matter how intense it is still a wave. And like all waves, it breaks. When you begin to watch your desires instead of being ruled by them, you notice their rise and fall more clearly. You don't push them away, but you also don't obey them blindly. You respond with presence. This is not about detachment. It's about wisdom. Wisdom that says, I can enjoy this fully, knowing it will pass. I can let this move through me without needing it to last forever. I can love without clinging. I can long without losing myself. The more you pay attention, the more you'll notice how natural this cycle is. Even within the same day, your preferences shift. What you wanted in the morning no longer satisfies by afternoon. The music that helped you focus earlier now irritates you. The food you craved at lunch feels unappealing by dinner. The mind changes. The senses change. This is not inconsistency. It is aliveness. You begin to see how desire is shaped by context, by energy levels, by mood, by memory. What you want isn't always about the object of desire. It's about what you hope it will give you. Comfort, escape, attention, meaning. But once you see through this, you can meet those needs more directly. You begin to care less about the object and more about the feeling behind it. This insight transforms consumption. You eat when you're truly hungry. You stop when you're full. You engage with art because it moves you, not because it's trending. You choose experiences that nourish, not ones that distract. You begin to consume with awareness, not habit. This also transforms relationships. You no longer attach to someone out of fear of being alone. You no longer stay in something that no longer aligns out of guilt or nostalgia. You learn to release with kindness. You understand that desire changes, and that's not betrayal. It's honesty. This honesty deepens self-compassion. You stop judging yourself for no longer wanting what you once loved. You stop feeling guilty for outgrowing a dream. You stop labeling your shifting interests as weakness. You begin to see it all as part of your unfolding. Even the desires that stay with you evolve in shape. Long-term love matures. Creative passion deepens. The way you hold them becomes more gentle, less urgent, more rooted, less about chasing, more about tending. The fire doesn't vanish, it steadies. You also begin to let others change without punishment. You stop expecting people to stay who they were when you met them. You give them room to grow, to drift, to rediscover. This doesn't mean accepting harm. It means recognizing that changing tastes are part of the human story. And when desire returns, as it always will, you welcome it with curiosity, not as a master, but as a visitor. You listen. You ask, "What are you teaching me now?" You let it move through you rather than trying to freeze it. There's beauty in this kind of impermanence. It keeps you honest. It keeps you awake. It helps you stay close to what's real now, not what was real then. And what's real now might be quieter, but more true, less dramatic, but more sustaining. This shift also helps you live with less regret. You understand that some choices were made from a place of desire that no longer exists, and that's okay. The version of you who wanted that made the best choice they could. You can honor their effort without needing to stay bound to it. You no longer need to explain your changes. You no longer seek permission to want differently. You begin to trust that what calls you now is enough. You follow the thread. You explore without needing a clear outcome. This practice returns you to yourself again and again. You are not the cravings that once defined you. You are the awareness that watches them rise and fall. You are not the roles your desires led you into. You are the presence that chooses again now. So when your taste changes, let it. When your longing fades, release it. When something once loved now feels distant, thank it and move forward. Nothing stays, not even the things you were sure you couldn't live without. And that's not emptiness. That's space. That's freedom. That's the chance to meet this moment as it truly is, with no script, no repetition, just your full attention and the quiet joy of being alive to want differently today. The softening of desire makes space for something deeper to emerge, something that lingers beneath the surface of so many of our actions and choices. Anger, a sharp heat that flares in moments of hurt, betrayal, or injustice. It arrives suddenly, full of urgency. It feels certain, justified, and impossible to ignore. But even this powerful emotion is not immune to change. Anger, no matter how loud it begins, fades. Not always quickly, not always cleanly, but always eventually. Time has a way of wearing it down. What once felt like a burning truth becomes a memory that no longer stings. The words you once wanted to scream are replaced with silence. Not because you've forgotten, but because the story has shifted. You're no longer standing in the moment that created the rage. You're watching it from a distance, and that distance changes everything. This doesn't mean your anger was wrong. It doesn't mean your pain wasn't real. It means the edge of the feeling softens. The fire becomes warmth. Sometimes it becomes sadness, sometimes clarity, sometimes forgiveness, not as something you force, but as something that arises on its own when the weight becomes too heavy to carry. At first, anger seems to give you strength. It offers a sense of control when you feel powerless. It helps protect your boundaries. It says, "This is not okay." It pushes back when something inside you has been crossed. In that way, it can be a necessary messenger, but it's not meant to stay. It is the spark, not the flame that keeps burning. When anger becomes prolonged, it begins to harm. It consumes the energy it was meant to protect. It narrows your vision. It builds a wall where a bridge might have been possible. It convinces you that the story cannot change, that the other person cannot grow, that the pain must remain sharp to be honored. But this is not the truth of healing. Healing requires time, and time transforms even the fiercest emotions. You begin to notice this shift in small ways. The conversation that once triggered you no longer grips your chest. The name that once made your pulse race now feels distant. The thought that kept repeating begins to fade in volume. You haven't erased the experience, but you've outgrown the need to relive it. The mind clings to anger when it doesn't know what else to do with the wound. But wounds, like everything else, respond to attention, to care, to being named and witnessed. Anger, when listened to with honesty, can lead you to what actually hurts. Beneath the rage is often grief, a loss of trust, a broken expectation, a part of you that didn't feel safe. And when you meet that part with compassion, something changes. You stop fighting the past. You stop needing to win. You start tending to what's left. The erosion of anger doesn't happen through willpower. It happens through awareness. The more you observe, the more you begin to see that anger does not hold still. It moves. It reshapes itself. And if you allow it, it leads you back to your center. Sometimes the anger you carry isn't even yours. It was passed down, inherited through silence, through culture, through generations. You learned to carry it before you knew its name, and now it lives in your reactions, in your tension, in your patterns. But even this can be softened. You can become the one who puts it down, not in denial, but in peace. Letting go of anger doesn't mean you excuse what happened. It means you choose to stop letting it define you. You recognize that continuing to suffer does not make the wound more real. It only delays the healing. And healing, by its nature, requires surrender. Time invites this surrender. It doesn't demand it. It simply keeps moving. And in that movement, you are offered a choice again and again, to hold or to release, to speak from the wound or from the scar, to defend the pain or to live beyond it. You may not feel ready right away. That's okay. The process is not linear. There may be moments when the anger returns, as sharp as ever. When something small pulls the old feeling back into the present. But even then, you are different. You know it now. You see it. You can breathe through it instead of reacting from it. This kind of awareness allows for more honest conversations. You no longer need to argue to be right. You no longer need to prove the depth of your pain. You speak more gently, more clearly. Not because you've minimized the hurt, but because you've stopped letting it own your voice. Time also teaches you that many of the things you once thought were personal weren't about you at all. The betrayal was a reflection of someone else's wound. The harsh words were spoken from their fear, not your worth. With distance, you can see the whole picture, not just the slice that hurt. This understanding brings humility. You begin to reflect on the times you were the one who hurt someone, the moments where your own anger spilled into someone else's life. You remember that others too are navigating their own unseen battles. And from this place, a deeper kind of compassion arises, not out of obligation, but out of recognition. Compassion doesn't excuse harm. It simply acknowledges complexity. It holds the truth that people are not only what they did in one moment, and neither are you. You are not frozen in your worst feeling. You are allowed to change, to grow, to release. Even the most intense betrayals, when given time and space, shift their shape. They no longer define you. They become part of your past, not your identity. You stop telling the story to keep it alive. You stop seeking justice as a way to find peace, because you've found something better than resolution. You've found release. This release is not dramatic. It's not always visible. It happens in how you breathe, in how you sleep, in how you stop bringing it up, in how your body stops bracing when you think of it, in how you begin to laugh again, fully, without holding back. Sometimes this erosion happens quietly. You wake up one day and realize it's been weeks since you thought about that person, that situation, that version of yourself. It no longer lives in your body. It no longer colors your days, and you didn't force it. You just stopped feeding it. This is the grace of time. It holds you while you burn and then cools the fire without asking. It doesn't rush you. It doesn't shame you. It waits until you're ready to put it down. And when you are, you feel the weight lift, not all at once, but in layers. You begin to notice how much more space you have now. Space to feel something new, to build something meaningful, to connect without guarding, to speak without defending, to rest without fear. This is the reward of letting anger soften. It gives you your life back, and with that life, you start choosing differently. You become slower to react, quicker to pause, more curious than defensive. You don't deny your feelings, but you no longer follow them blindly. You ask deeper questions. You respond with more presence. This presence becomes your strength. You don't need anger to protect you anymore. You have awareness. You have boundaries. You have voice. You have peace. Not because nothing hurts anymore, but because you've learned how to meet hurt with wisdom, not just heat. And when someone else shows you their anger, you don't meet it with fire. You hold your ground. You listen if it's safe. You step away if it's not. You no longer need to match the energy that once ruled you. You move differently now, so if you still carry anger, let it be seen. Let it speak. But don't let it steer. Let it teach you what matters. Let it show you where healing is needed. And when it's done speaking, let it go. Because every rage, no matter how fierce, is a wave. It rises, it crashes, and in time, it disappears, leaving the shore reshaped, but still standing. Softer, quieter, clearer than before. As anger begins to soften and lose its grip, something else becomes visible. Another illusion we often build our lives around. Not emotional, but social. Not rooted in pain, but in attention. Fame. The hunger to be seen, known, praised. It can arrive like a high, filling a space within us we didn't even realize was empty. But just like anger, it fades. Just like desire, it transforms. And just like every other human experience, fame is temporary, no matter how brightly it once burned. Recognition may feel permanent while you're in the spotlight, but history shows again and again how quickly names are forgotten. What was once celebrated becomes overlooked. What once filled headlines becomes a footnote. This is not cynicism, it's clarity. It invites a deeper look at why we seek validation and whether the applause we crave is worth what we trade for it. There are countless examples of once famous figures whose names no longer stir any emotion. Artists who shaped generations, but whose work now gathers dust. Icons who were once surrounded by admiration, but are now known only by historians or niche followers. They were celebrated, copied, worshipped, and now they are largely invisible to those who once idolized them. Fame doesn't vanish because someone failed. It vanishes because attention is unstable. What captures it today may bore it tomorrow. The public mind is always looking for something new, something bigger, something more current. This means fame, by nature, is not a sign of lasting worth. It is a passing arrangement between performer and audience. Understanding this changes how you engage with your need to be seen. It doesn't mean you stop creating or stop caring. It means you stop expecting permanence from a world that moves on quickly. You begin to ask better questions. Am I building something real or something visible? Am I chasing approval or offering something true? There is also something deeply human about wanting to be remembered. To feel that your voice mattered, that your work left a mark. But when you realize how even the brightest stars eventually fade, you learn to place your meaning in something deeper. You start caring more about your intention than your reputation. Some of the most impactful people in history were never widely known. Their lives were not documented in books or headlines. Their value was felt by a few, not by crowds. But what they gave was sincere. What they lived was honest. They were present to those around them, not to the idea of being remembered forever. The myth of lasting fame leads many into exhaustion. The pressure to stay relevant. The fear of being forgotten. The constant push to remain visible. But relevance is a moving target, and chasing it often leads you away from your true path. The more you cling to the spotlight, the more you build your identity on something you can't control. Eventually, the moment always passes. The world turns its attention elsewhere, and when it does, what matters is not whether you're still being watched, but whether you lived with integrity while the attention was on you. Whether you were kind when you didn't have to be. Whether your work was honest even when no one was listening. There is also humility in watching fame fade. It shows that every pedestal is temporary. No one stays adored forever. No image survives without cracks. And once you stop chasing admiration, you start finding joy in quieter forms of recognition, being known by one person deeply, being trusted, being remembered in small ways, not by the masses, but by those who mattered to you. This does not mean fame is bad. It simply means it's fleeting. It can be used wisely, or it can be pursued for the wrong reasons. When handled with care, it can amplify meaningful work. But when used to fill a void, it always leaves you hungrier than before. The lives of those who once held global attention often reveal this truth. Many struggled when the spotlight faded. They felt lost without the noise. Their sense of self was tied to being recognized, and when that recognition ended, they felt invisible, not just to the world, but to themselves. This is why it's vital to build a life not based on visibility, but on presence. Not on applause, but on alignment. You ask yourself, what do I still care about when no one is looking? What still feels worth doing when no one is clapping? These answers ground you. They help you build something that lasts beyond public attention. Your value is not in being unforgettable. It is in being real. The world may remember your name, or it may not, but you will remember how you lived. You will carry the truth of whether you were true to yourself. And that is what endures when everything else dissolves. This awareness brings relief. You no longer need to be the best, the loudest, the most followed. You can be consistent, quiet, rooted. You can choose to serve rather than impress, to speak with depth rather than volume, to contribute, not perform. And, ironically, when you stop trying to be seen, you often become more impactful. Your focus shifts. Your energy is no longer spent on image management. It's spent on creating, connecting, and living from the inside out. This kind of life leaves quieter marks, but deeper ones. The stories of obsolete icons remind us that no matter how celebrated a person once was, time will move forward. What matters in the long run is whether they left behind something meaningful, not just to the crowd, but to the people around them. Whether they used their voice to lift others. Whether they stayed human in the face of being turned into a symbol. This lesson applies to all of us, whether we're in the public eye or not. In a digital world, even ordinary lives are now curated and presented. We all manage a kind of personal brand, but behind the posts and profiles, we're still just people, longing to be known, to be loved, to be safe. And we're all going to be forgotten, eventually, by most. That's not a tragedy. That's a shared truth. You begin to focus less on making a name for yourself and more on making peace with yourself. You stop needing to be admired and start choosing to be honest. You stop measuring your life by numbers and start measuring it by depth, by courage, by compassion. And when the moment comes that your name no longer carries recognition, you will not panic. You will not feel erased, because you built your worth in places that don't fade, in presence, in truth, in quiet kindness, in steady love. Fleeting fame becomes not something to fear, but something to understand, to watch with clear eyes, to appreciate without needing, to let pass without regret. It teaches you to be here, fully, while you're here, and to know when it's time to step back into the stillness, where your life speaks most clearly, even without a spotlight. So here you are, at the end of a long and quiet journey, one that moved through dissolving identities, unfinished stories, fading emotions, passing reflections, forgotten fame, and soft, sacred breaths. You've seen how everything, even what once felt solid, changes. You've felt the weight of holding on and the lightness that follows letting go. Every moment, every role, every craving, every note, every version of yourself, it all passes. And still, something remains. Presence. Not permanence, not perfection. Presence. This is the peace that doesn't depend on certainty. The kind of peace that holds you through the endings and helps you fall asleep with a softer heart. If something in these words found a home in you, if you're carrying one less weight or holding one new thought, tell me. Leave a comment with just 3 words. I accept impermanence. Let that be your quiet echo, your own ritual of release. And if you'd like to keep walking paths like this with me, subscribe to the channel. Let's keep learning how to live fully, love gently, and let go gracefully, together. Until next time, rest well. You're already exactly where you need to be.